I was scrubbing the black grease off my knuckles in the bathroom of a five-star restaurant when I heard a voice I recognized coming through the thin, decorative wall separating the men's and women's lounges. It was Brittany, my future daughter-in-law. She was laughing a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the marble tiles. "Do not worry about the old man," she told her friend. "I have already arranged it with the wedding planner. We are putting Moses at table 19. You know, the one right next to the kitchen swing doors and the trash disposal. I do not want his smell of motor oil and cheap tobacco ruining the appetite of my family from the Hamptons. He is nothing but a filthy mechanic, and quite frankly, having him in the photos would be an embarrassment to the Vance legacy." I stood there, the water running cold over my calloused hands. I did not cry. I did not storm in there and scream. I simply turned off of the faucet, looked at my reflection in the gold-framed mirror, and smiled a smile that would have terrified anyone who truly knew me. Because what Brittany did not know, what even my own son Jamal seemed to have forgotten, was that these dirty hands she despised had built an empire that owned the very ground she was standing on. She wanted to treat me like the help. So I decided right then and there that I would give her the performance of a lifetime. Before I tell you how I turned her dream wedding into her worst nightmare, please take a second to like and subscribe if you believe that respect is something you earn, not something you buy. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from. My name is Moses Carter, but everyone just calls me Mose. I am 71 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street in my stained blue coveralls with my name stitched on the pocket, you would probably look right through me. That is just how I like it. For 50 years I have been under the hood of cars, breathing in exhaust and wrestling with rusted bolts. To the world, I am just an old black man with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints. To my son Jamal and his fiancée Brittany, I am an ATM machine that occasionally needs an oil change. What they do not see, and what I have never felt the need to broadcast, is that those coveralls are a uniform of choice, not necessity. Carter Classics isn't just a garage. It is the premier restoration facility for vintage vehicles on the East Coast. I do not just fix cars. I bring ghosts back to life for collectors who pay six figures without blinking. I own the commercial block my shop sits on. I own the apartment complex 3 streets over. My net worth is something my accountant and I chuckle about over coffee. But to my son, I am just a blue-collar relic he is ashamed to introduce to his new high society friends. The day of the rehearsal dinner started like any other Tuesday with a crisis only I could fix. I was deep inside the engine bay of a 1969 Mustang Boss when my phone rang. It was Jamal. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask if I was busy. He just screamed, "Dad, the BMW is dead. I am stuck on the shoulder of I-95 and the rehearsal starts in 2 hours. Brittany is going to kill me. You have to come. Not a tow truck. Not AAA. Me." Because Jamal knew that when his daddy fixes something, it stays fixed, and more importantly, it is free. I wiped my hands on a rag, closed the shop, and drove my tow truck out to the highway. There he was, leaning against his leased luxury sedan, sweating through a suit that cost more than my first car. He did not say thank you when I pulled up. He just tossed me the keys and said, "Fix it fast, Dad. I cannot be late." I got his car running in 20 minutes. It was a simple alternator issue, something a man his age should know how to handle, but I never taught him. That was my mistake. I spent his whole life working so he would never have to get his hands dirty, and now I was looking at a man who did not know the value of the grit under my nails. By the time we got the car moving, I did not have time to go home and change. I was wearing my work clothes stained with fresh oil and sweat. Jamal looked at me with pure disgust as we pulled into the parking lot of the Gilded Lily, the fanciest venue in the city. "You cannot go in there looking like that," he hissed, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. "You look like a janitor. Just stay in the truck until I can sneak you in the back." I looked at my son, this boy I had carried on my shoulders, this boy whose private school tuition I paid for by working 16-hour days, this boy who was now ashamed of the very labor that put the clothes on his back. "I am your father, Jamal," I said, my voice low and steady. "If these people cannot respect the man who raised you, maybe they do not deserve to sit at my table." He rolled his eyes. "This is not about you, Dad. This is Brittany's night. Her family is royalty. They are from the Hamptons. Just please try not to embarrass me." I parked the truck around the corner, not because he asked, but because I did not want to block the fire hydrant. I walked to the front entrance of the restaurant, my head held high. The valet, a young kid who looked like he had never worked a day of hard labor in his life, stepped in front of me with his hand raised. "Delivery entrance is around the back, old-timer," he sneered, looking down at my work boots. "We do not give handouts here." I stopped. I felt the heat rising in my chest, the same fire that had kept me going when banks refused me loans 40 years ago because of the color of my skin. "I am not a delivery boy," I said, my voice calm but heavy like a sledgehammer. "I am here for the Carter and Vance rehearsal dinner." The valet laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Yeah, right, and I am the president. Move along before I call security." Before I could reach into my pocket and pull out the wad of cash that would have silenced him, the double doors swung open. Jamal came rushing out, his face flushed red. He did not come to my defense. He did not reprimand the valet for disrespecting his father. He grabbed my arm and pulled me aside, his grip tight and frantic. "Dad, what are you doing?" he whispered harshly. "I told you to wait. You are making a scene. Everyone is looking." I looked past him through the glass doors. I saw them. The Vance family. Brittany's parents sitting at the head table like they were monarchs holding court. They were drinking champagne, laughing, looking out at the commotion with amused disdain. They looked like people who had never worried about a bill in their lives. I would find out later just how much of a lie that appearance was, but in that moment all I saw was the way they looked at my son like he was a pet they had allowed their daughter to adopt. "I am coming in, Jamal," I said, pulling my arm free. "I am going to wash up, and then I am going to sit down and eat the dinner that I know you put on the credit card I pay off every month." Jamal looked like he wanted to scream, but he knew better than to push me too far in public. "Fine," he spat. "Just use the bathroom in the lobby. Do not go into the main hall until you have scrubbed that grease off. You smell like a garage." I walked past the valet, who was now looking at me with confusion, and pushed through the heavy oak doors. The lobby smelled of expensive lilies and old money. I walked straight to the restroom, my heavy boots thudding against the plush carpet. I entered the men's lounge, a room filled with marble and gold fixtures, and turned on the tap. The water was warm. The soap smelled like lavender. I began to scrub. That was when I heard it. The walls in these old buildings are thick, but the ventilation grates carry sound like a telephone wire. The women's lounge was right next door, and Brittany's voice was unmistakable. It was high-pitched, entitled, and dripping with venom. "I cannot believe he actually showed up in his work clothes," she was saying. "I mean, does he not have any shame?" My father asked me if he was the hired help. I was so mortified I almost died right there. I froze. I turned off the water so I could hear better. Another voice, one of her bridesmaids, giggled. "Well, at least he is paying for part of it, right?" Brittany scoffed. "Paying for it, please. Jamal says the old man is tight with money because he barely has any. He lives in that run-down house in the district. He is probably hoarding every penny just to keep the lights on. That is why we have to get him out of the picture as soon as the ring is on my finger." My hands were still soapy, hovering over the sink. "Get me out of the picture." What did that mean? Jamal promised me. Brittany continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Once we are married, we are going to convince him to sell that dusty old garage and the land. My dad says developers are killing for that real estate. We sell it. Put Moses in a state home, one of the cheap ones where he can rot with his own kind, and we use the cash to buy the penthouse downtown. He is senile anyway. He won't even know what hit him." I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was lined with age, my hair was gray, but my eyes were sharp. Senile, I could tell you the part number of a distributor cap for a '57 Chevy from memory. I managed a portfolio of assets that would make her father's head spin. But to them, I was just a resource to be harvested and discarded, a stumbling block on their road to a luxury lifestyle they had not earned. "Sit him by the trash," Brittany said, her voice rising again with laughter. "Put him at table 19. Tell the servers to give him the chicken, not the steak. He would not know the difference anyway. He probably eats out of a can at home." I dried my hands on a paper towel. I did not rush. I dried each finger methodically. I looked at the grease that was still faintly visible in the creases of my palms. That grease was honest. It was the result of building something, fixing something, making something work when it was broken. These people, my son included, they were broken in a way no mechanic could fix. They were rusted out on the inside. I walked out of the bathroom. I did not go into the dining hall. I did not go cause a scene. Not yet. I walked straight out the front door past the valet, who was too busy parking a rented Bentley to notice me. I walked to my truck, climbed into the cab, and sat there for a moment in the dark. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. It was where I kept my real numbers. The account balances the property deeds, the trust fund I had set up for Jamal's future children. I looked at the numbers. Millions, millions of dollars that I had planned to share with them. Millions that represented my life's work. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice. "Solomon," I said when the voice answered. "It's Mose." "Mose, is everything all right? You sound cold." "I am not cold, Solomon. I am awake. I need you to do something for me. I need you to look into the Vance family. Brittany Vance and her parents. I want to know everything. Debts, assets, credit scores." And Solomon, "Yes, Mose. Freeze the account I gave Jamal access to, the one he uses for his business expenses. Freeze it all. Tonight." There was a pause on the line. Solomon was my lawyer, but he was also my oldest friend. He knew what that account meant. He knew it was my way of helping my son feel like a man without handing him cash directly. "You sure about this, Mose?" "The wedding is in 2 days." I looked back at the glowing windows of the restaurant. I could see the silhouettes of the people inside, toasting, celebrating, laughing at the empty chair where the filthy mechanic was supposed to sit. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "They want to treat me like a stranger." "Fine. They are about to find out just how powerful a stranger can be." I started the truck. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through my chest. I drove away from the restaurant, leaving the laughter behind. I was going back to my garage. I had work to do. And this time I wasn't fixing a car. I was fixing a mistake I made 32 years ago when I taught my son that money was free. He was about to learn the true cost of everything. I walked out of that restroom feeling heavy, like I was carrying an engine block on my shoulders. The music from the rehearsal dinner drifted into the lobby, a soft jazz melody that felt miles away from the cold reality I had just heard through the wall. I adjusted my cap, pulling it lower over my eyes. I knew I did not belong in that room of crystal chandeliers and silk tablecloths. Not tonight. Not looking like this. But I still had one thing left to do. I reached into the breast pocket of my coveralls and felt the envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. To some of the people in that dining room, $10,000 might have been pocket change. It might have been what they spent on a weekend getaway or a handbag. But for a man who built his life turning wrenches, that check represented hundreds of hours of sweat. It was early mornings and late nights. It was burnt fingers and aching backs. It was my way of telling my son that even though he was entering a world I did not understand, a world that clearly did not want me, I still supported him. I wanted them to have a start, a cushion. It was a peace offering. I stepped out into the cool night air. The valet stand was busy. Expensive cars were lining up, their polished paint gleaming under the portico lights. I saw Jamal and Brittany standing near the entrance waiting for their ride. Brittany was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, looking bored and beautiful. Jamal was pacing, checking his watch, looking like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and expensive perfume. I walked up to them. My work boots scuffed against the pavement, a gritty sound that made Brittany look up. Her face twisted instantly. It was a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance, like she had stepped in gum. "You are still here?" she asked, snapping her compact shut. "I thought Jamal told you to leave." I ignored her tone. I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the ground, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Jamal," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "I am going. I know I am not dressed for the party. I just wanted to give you this before I left. It is for the wedding, for the honeymoon. Just a little something to help you start off right." I held out the envelope. My hand was steady despite the grease stains that I hadn't been able to scrub completely from my cuticles. The white paper looked stark against my dark, calloused skin. Jamal looked at the envelope, then at me. For a second I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the boy who used to sit on my workbench and hand me tools, the boy who used to look at me like I was Superman because I could fix anything. He reached out his hand, but Brittany was faster. She snatched the envelope from my fingers with a speed that startled me. She ripped it open, not caring that she tore the corner of the check inside. She pulled it out and held it up to the light, squinting at the numbers. 10,000. She let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. She looked at the check, then at me, her eyes wide with mock incredulity. "You are joking, right? This is it. This is your contribution." "It is what I have right now," I said quietly. "It is honest money." "Honest money?" she mocked, waving the check in the air. "This is pathetic. Do you know how much this wedding costs?" The flowers alone cost more than this. My parents just gifted us a villa in the Hamptons, a Villa Moses. That is $1 million property, and you come here smelling like a dumpster handing us crumbs." She did not wait for an answer. She took the check between her manicured fingers and tore it in half. Then she tore it again. The sound of the paper ripping felt loud in the quiet driveway. The valet froze. The couple waiting for their car behind us went silent. Everyone was watching. "You keep this," she said, throwing the confetti of paper into my face. The pieces fluttered down, landing on my oil-stained shoulders, catching in my beard. "Use it to buy some soap, maybe some deodorant. God knows you need it more than we need your charity." I stood there. I did not brush the paper off. I did not raise my voice. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, freezing the anger before it could explode. I looked past Brittany. I looked straight at my son. "Jamal," I said. He looked up then. He looked at his future wife standing there with her chin raised in triumph. Then he looked at me, his father standing there in work clothes with torn paper on my chest. He had to make a choice. It was the most important choice of his life, and he made it without hesitation. "She is right, Dad," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "It is embarrassing. $10,000. After everything the Vances are doing for us, it looks cheap. You look cheap, Jamal." I warned, my voice dropping an octave. "Just go," he snapped, finally finding his courage now that he had an audience. "You are ruining the vibe. Go home. Take a shower. And if you are coming to the wedding tomorrow, use the service entrance. I do not want my guests thinking we are related to the help." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the city traffic seemed to hush. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The boy I raised was gone. He had been consumed by this hollow, shallow man who measured worth by the label on a suit. I nodded slowly. "Once. Just once." "All right," I said. "I will go." I turned around. I did not look back at them. I did not look at the valet who was staring at me with his mouth open. I walked to my truck, the old Ford that had hauled more cars than Jamal had ever driven. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. As I pulled away, I saw them in the rearview mirror. Brittany was laughing again, dusting her hands off as if she had touched something filthy. Jamal was putting his arm around her, whispering something that made her smile. They looked like the perfect couple, the perfect, beautiful, rotten-to-the-core couple. I did not drive home. Home was a concept that felt slippery right now. Home was where you raised your family, and it seemed I didn't have one anymore. Instead, I drove to the industrial district. I drove past the warehouses and the factories until I reached the large gated lot at the end of the street. The sign above the gate was modest, Carter Classics. But behind that gate was my world. I punched in the code and the heavy steel gate rolled back. I drove through, parking my truck next to a line of vintage Jaguars and Mercedes that were waiting for my touch. I unlocked the main office door and stepped inside. The smell of oil and old leather greeted me like an old friend. It was clean here, organized, honest. I walked past the front desk, past the wall of framed photos showing Jamal at various ages. Jamal in a go-kart. Jamal graduating high school. Jamal holding his first college acceptance letter. I did not stop to look at them. I went into my private office in the back. It was a simple room, just a desk, a couple of chairs, and a heavy steel safe in the corner. I knelt down. My knees popped, a reminder of my age, a reminder of the years I had put in. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying thud. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, stacked neatly, were the deeds to the properties I owned, the commercial lots, the apartment buildings, the paperwork for the resort where the wedding was being held tomorrow. And right on top was a blue folder. I pulled it out and sat at my desk. I opened it. Inside were the documents I had drawn up years ago just in case. The documents that gave me the power to revoke, to cancel, to foreclose. The documents that detailed the loans I had quietly guaranteed for Jamal over the years. The loans for his car. The loans for his flashy condo. The loans that kept his appearance of success afloat while he drowned in debt. I ran my finger over the papers. I had kept this folder locked away, hoping I would never have to use it. Hoping that my son would stand on his own 2 feet. Hoping that he would find a partner who valued him for his heart, not his wallet. But tonight he had made his position clear. He had chosen his side. He had told me to go home. He had told me I was cheap. He had told me I was nothing but an embarrassment. I picked up a pen. The tip hovered over the signature line of the first document. It was a revocation of the guarantor status on Jamal's business line of credit. One signature and his cards would stop working. One signature and his financial house of cards would begin to shake. I remembered the look on Brittany's face when she tore up that check. I remembered the way she called me filthy. I remembered Jamal telling me to use the service entrance. I signed the paper, then I turned the page. The next document was the deed transfer for the wedding venue. Technically, my holding company owned the resort. I had bought it 3 years ago as a distressed asset and turned it around. I had never told Jamal. I wanted to surprise him on his wedding day by tearing up the bill. I looked at the invoice for the wedding. $150,000, unpaid, guaranteed by the father of the groom. I took the pen and drew a thick dark line through the word guaranteed. I wrote void next to it. Next. I closed the blue folder. The silence in the garage was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a storm gathering strength. They wanted a show. They wanted to judge a book by its cover. Tomorrow I was going to give them a reading they would never forget. I stood up and walked over to the small sink in the corner of the office. I turned on the tap and pumped some heavy-duty soap into my hands. I scrubbed. I scrubbed until the grease was gone. I scrubbed until my hands were raw and clean. Jamal told me to wash up. So I did. I was washing my hands of him. And tomorrow, when I walked into that wedding, I wouldn't be Moses the mechanic. I would be Moses the landlord. And eviction notice was already in the mail. I slept on the leather cot in the back of my office that night. I could not bring myself to go back to the empty house that I had bought 30 years ago with the dream of filling it with grandchildren. The air in the garage was cool and smelled of gasoline and iron, a scent that had always brought me peace. But when the sun began to bleed through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, I felt no peace. I felt the heavy, suffocating weight of what I had to do. I was awake long before the phone rang. I was sitting at my workbench polishing the chrome bumper of a 1955 Mercedes Gullwing. This was not just any car. It was a contract for a tech billionaire in Silicon Valley who had been on my waiting list for 3 years. He was paying me $250,000 just for the labor, not including parts. They call me the golden hand in the collector circles. They say if Moses Carter touches an engine, it does not just run, it sings. I have restored vehicles that have sold at auction for more than the GDP of small countries. But my son, he thinks I change oil for a living. The phone vibrated against the metal workbench, a jarring, angry buzz that shattered the morning silence. It was Jamal. I looked at the screen for a long moment. My hand holding the polishing rag hovered over the decline button. Part of me wanted to let it ring. Part of me wanted to disappear. But the plan I had set in motion required precision. I had to play my part. I answered. "Dad, pick up, pick up, pick up." Jamal's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysteria. It was the voice of a man who had never been told no in his life, suddenly facing a locked door. "I am here, Jamal," I said, keeping my voice low and tired. "It is 7 in the morning. What is wrong? What is wrong? Everything is wrong. I am at the wedding planner's office. I tried to pay the second deposit for the catering and the flowers. The card was declined." "Dad, declined. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The lady looked at me like I was a criminal. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. So it had begun. The revocation of this guarantor status I had signed last night had hit the banking system faster than I expected. The credit cards he carried, the ones he flashed around town to impress Brittany and her fake aristocratic parents, were technically in his name, but they were backed by my assets. Without my signature, he was just a man with a mediocre credit score and a maxed-out limit. "It must be a mistake," I said, lying with a calmness that scared me. "Maybe the bank flagged it for fraud. It is a large charge." "No, I called the bank." Jamal screamed. I could hear traffic in the background. He was pacing outside, probably trying to keep Brittany from hearing the panic in his voice. "They said the line of credit has been frozen. They said the guarantor withdrew support." "Dad, what did you do?" "You have to fix this right now." I rubbed my temple. The headache that had started at the rehearsal dinner was throbbing behind my eyes. "I did not do anything, son. I told you I am just a mechanic. I do not control the banks. Stop it with the poor mouth act," he snapped. "I know you have savings. I know you have that retirement account you never touch. Mom told me before she passed that you were saving for a rainy day. Well, it is pouring, Dad. I need $50,000. Right now. Wire it to my account. $50,000. He asked for it like he was asking for a glass of water. He did not ask if I had it. He did not ask if I could afford it. He just assumed that whatever I had tucked away for my old age was his by right. 50,000, I asked slowly. Jamal, that is everything I have. That is my life savings. If I give you that, I have nothing left. How am I supposed to live? We will take care of you, he shouted, and the lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Once the wedding is over, once Brittany and I get settled in the penthouse, we will figure something out. You can stay in the guest room for a while, or we will find you a nice place, a home. Just give me the money, Dad. If I do not pay this deposit by noon, we lose the vendors. Brittany will leave me. Do you want that? Do you want to be the reason your son ends up alone? I looked at the Mercedes in front of me. I looked at the curve of the fender, the way the light played off the silver paint. I thought about the hours I had spent bringing it back to life. I thought about the care I put into every single screw. And then I thought about my son who wanted to strip me bare and toss me aside like a used part. I cannot give it to you, Jamal, I said. There was a silence on the other line, a dangerous, heavy silence. What did you say? I said, I cannot give it to you, because I do not have it anymore. What do you mean you do not have it? You have been saving for 40 years. Where is it? I took a deep breath. This was the pivot point. This was the moment I cemented the image of the foolish, incompetent old man in his mind. I invested it, I stammered, injecting a tremor into my voice. A man came to the shop last week. He told me about this cryptocurrency opportunity. He said I could double my money in a month. I wanted to surprise you for the wedding. I wanted to buy you a house, so I gave him the access codes. I paused, letting the silence stretch, and Jamal whispered, and he is gone, Jamal. The website is down. The phone number is disconnected. It is gone. All of it. The retirement fund, the savings. I have nothing left but the change in my pocket. I waited for the sympathy. I waited for him to ask if I was okay. I waited for him to say, Dad, I am so sorry. We will call the police. We will figure this out. Instead, I heard a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. You stupid old fool, he screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You gave it away. You gave my inheritance to a scammer. Are you kidding me? How could you be so dumb? I knew you were losing it, but this is pathetic, Jamal. Please, I said, keeping my voice weak. I was trying to help. Help. You have ruined everything. You are useless. Absolutely useless. Do not expect us to bail you out. If you are broke, that is your problem. Do not come crying to me when you are eating cat food. And do not think for a second you are sitting with the family tomorrow. If you show up, you stay out of sight. I cannot even look at you right now. He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time listening to the dial tone. My heart was beating slow and steady. The pain I expected to feel, the heartbreak of a father hearing his son wish him ill, it was there, but it was buried under a layer of cold resolve. He had shown me exactly who he was. There was no ambiguity left, no doubt. He did not love me. He loved what he thought he could take from me. I placed the phone down on the workbench. I picked up the polishing rag again and wiped a smudge off the chrome. Then I reached for a second phone I kept in the locked drawer of my desk. It was a satellite phone, secure and direct. I dialed a number. It was answered on the first ring. Good morning, Mr. Carter, a crisp professional voice said. This was not a receptionist. This was David, my personal executive assistant. David operated out of an office in Manhattan that managed my portfolio. Jamal had never met him. Jamal did not even know he existed. To Jamal, I was a mechanic. To David, I was the principal investor in a real estate trust that owned 3 city blocks in downtown Atlanta. David, I said, my voice returning to its natural commanding timbre. We are moving to phase 2. Yes, sir. I have the files ready. I want you to access the auxiliary account. The one under the shell corporation I set up for Jamal's living expenses. The one that pays his rent, his car note, and that flashy watch he wears. I see it here, sir. Balance is currently $18,000. Do you want me to transfer it? No, I said. I want you to freeze it, lock it down completely, flag it for suspicious activity, make it so that even if he walks into the bank with a birth certificate and a blood sample, he cannot get a dime out of it. And David, yes, sir. Contact the leasing office for his apartment complex, the penthouse he thinks he is moving into, next week. The one owned by Carter Holdings. Yes, sir. The lease is pending your final signature. Cancel it. Tell the management company the applicant failed the final financial vetting, and instruct them to serve an eviction notice on his current unit. He is 2 months behind, and I am done covering the difference." There was a pause on the line. David was a professional, but even he knew the severity of what I was asking. "Sir, the eviction notice. That gives him 3 days to vacate. That is the day after the wedding." "I know," I said, staring at my reflection in the polished metal of the Mercedes. "That is the point. He told me to go home. He told me I was useless. Now he is going to find out what it feels like to have no home at all." "Understood, Mr. Carter. I will initiate the protocols immediately. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I need you to arrange a delivery for me. I need a tuxedo. But not for the wedding. I need something specific. I need a uniform. A janitor's uniform. Gray. With a name patch that says staff. Send it to the motel on 4th Street. I will be checking in there under my own name. A janitor's uniform, sir. Just do it, David. And get the legal team ready. I have a feeling the Vance family is going to try to sue someone by the end of the weekend, and I want to make sure the only thing they win is a bill for my time. I will take care of it, sir." I hung up the phone. The morning sun was fully streaming through the windows, now bathing the garage in light. I stood up and stretched. My back popped. I felt old, but I also felt strong. I walked over to the safe in the corner. I spun the dial and opened the heavy door. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were gold bars. Real gold. Not cryptocurrency. Not promises. Cold, hard assets. I took one out and weighed it in my hand. It was heavy, dense, and real. Jamal wanted to talk about value. He wanted to talk about worth. He was about to get a master class. I put the gold back and locked the safe. I had a uniform to pick up. I had a role to play. And the curtain was about to go up on the second act. I was sitting on the edge of a sagging mattress in room 104 of the Starlight Motel when the knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was a rapid, demanding pounding, the kind of sound a landlord makes when the rent is overdue. The motel was a dive on the south side of the city, the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed all night like an angry hornet and the carpet smelled of stale smoke and bad decisions. I had checked in 2 hours ago, paying cash, leaving my luxury truck parked blocks away and walking here in my oldest clothes. I needed the stage to be perfect. I opened the door, and there she stood. Brittany. She was wearing a white silk pantsuit that probably cost more than the maid who cleaned this room made in a year. She held a scented handkerchief over her nose, her eyes darting left and right as if she expected a disease to jump off the peeling paint and attack her. Behind her, parked right in the fire lane with the hazard lights flashing, was my son's BMW. He did not get out. He sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead, unable to face the father he had just bankrupted. "May I come in?" she asked, though she was already pushing past me before I could answer. She stepped into the small, dim room and let out a dramatic sigh of disgust. She looked at the water-stained ceiling tiles. She looked at the cheap particle board dresser. She looked at me standing there in my undershirt and work pants. So she said, her voice dripping with false pity, "This is it. Jamal told me you lost everything, but I did not think it was this bad. A motel. Moses, really." I closed the door, shutting out the noise of the highway. "It is what I can afford, Brittany," I said, keeping my voice low and defeated. "The crypto scam took it all. I have paid for this room for the week. After that, I do not know." She did not offer sympathy. She did not offer help. She tossed a plastic garment bag onto the bed. It landed with a crinkle. "Well, we have a solution for tomorrow," she said briskly. "Jamal and I talked. We know you want to come to the wedding. And despite everything, despite you ruining our financial plans and embarrassing us at the rehearsal, we are willing to let you attend." I looked at the bag on the bed. "You are?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "But there are conditions. Strict conditions. My parents are inviting Senators Moses. They are inviting business tycoons from New York. I cannot have you sitting at a table looking like a charity case. It would raise questions. It would damage the Vance brand. So we came up with a story I repeated." "Yes." She walked over to the bed and unzipped the bag. She pulled out a gray polyester uniform. It was a janitor's jumpsuit. On the pocket there was a patch that said staff. "You are going to be the help," she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "We told my parents that you have been the family gardener for 30 years. We said you practically raised Jamal while you were trimming the hedges. It is a touching story, really." The loyal servant watching the young master get married. It explains why you are rough around the edges. It explains why you have no money. And it explains why you will not be sitting at a table. I stared at the uniform. It was the ultimate insult. I owned the resort where this wedding was taking place. I paid the salaries of the real staff, and she wanted me to cosplay as a servant at my own property. She wanted to erase my fatherhood and replace it with servitude. You want me to wear that? I asked. I want you to be invisible, she snapped. You will wear this. You will stand by the service entrance during the ceremony. You will not speak to the guests unless spoken to. And when the reception starts, you can go into the kitchen and eat with the catering staff. That is the deal. Take it or leave it. I looked at her. I saw the entitlement in her eyes. I saw the absolute certainty that she was better than me because her skin was lighter and her last name came with a fake pedigree. She thought she was winning. She thought she was solving a problem. I walked over to the bed and picked up the uniform. The fabric was rough against my fingers. I held it up. It was my size. She had planned this. She had measured me with her eyes and bought a costume to humiliate me. But as I held that gray polyester, I realized something. It was not a costume of shame. It was a Trojan horse. If I walked in there as a guest, I was just an old man in a cheap suit. But if I walked in there as staff, I had access. I had keys. I had the ability to go anywhere, hear anything, and see everything without being noticed. She wasn't banning me from the wedding. She was giving me backstage passes to her own destruction. I looked up at her. I let my shoulders slump. I let a look of resignation wash over my face. Okay, I said softly. I will do it. I just want to see my son get married. Good, she said, checking her watch. Make sure you are there by 10. Use the loading dock around the back. Do not park that rust bucket of a truck near the guests. And Moses. Yes, wash your hands. You still smell like grease. She turned on her heel and walked out. She did not say goodbye. She did not look back. She marched to the BMW, got in, and I watched as my son drove her away, leaving his father in a motel room with a janitor's uniform. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I stood up straight. The slump in my shoulders vanished. The look of defeat in my eyes was replaced by a cold, hard glint. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back, watching the empty street. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was desperate. They had no idea that I was the one holding the keys to the cage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my secure phone. I dialed Solomon's number again. He picked up on the first ring. Solomon. I said, my voice steady and commanding. I am here, Mose. Did she take the bait? Hook, line, and sinker, I said. I have the uniform. I am the help. Now I need you to do your part. I need you to dig into the Vance family. I am already on it, Mose Solomon said, but I need a specific direction. What are you looking for? I am looking for the truth. Solomon. Brittany stood here in this room and talked about her family's legacy. She talked about the Hamptons. She talked about senators. But I looked at her shoes, Solomon. Her shoes. Yes, she is wearing Louboutins, or at least she thinks she is. But I know leather. I have restored interiors on Bentleys and Rolls-Royces for 40 years. I know the grain of high-quality leather. Those shoes were fake. Good fakes, but fakes. The red sole was painted, not stained. You think they are frauds? Solomon asked. I think people with real money do not need to try this hard to humiliate a mechanic, I said. I think they are projecting. I want you to check the deed on that Hamptons estate she keeps bragging about. I want you to check the registration on that Rolls-Royce her father drives. I want to know who actually owns it. Consider it done, Solomon said. I will have a preliminary report within the hour. Good, I said. And Solomon. Yes, draft a purchase agreement. For what? For the debt. If the Vances owe money, if they have liens, if they have mortgages, they are behind on, I want to buy them. I want to be the one holding the paper. Mose, that could cost a fortune. I do not care, I said. I want to own every inch of ground they stand on. When I pull the rug out tomorrow, I want to make sure there is no floor underneath them either. I understand, Solomon said. I will get to work. I hung up the phone and looked at the gray uniform on the bed. I ran my hand over the patch that said staff. I smiled a cold, humorless smile. She wanted a gardener, fine. I was going to do some pruning. I was going to cut away the rot, the dead branches, the parasites that had attached themselves to my family tree. And when I was done, there would be nothing left but the truth. I took off my shirt and picked up the uniform. I stepped into it. I zipped it up. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like a servant. I looked like a man on a mission. Tomorrow the Vance family was going to learn a lesson about the working class. They were going to learn that the man who cleans the floor is the one who sees all the dirt. And I had a lot of cleaning up to do. I sat in the dim light of the motel room staring at the gray polyester jumpsuit hanging on the back of the door. It looked like a shroud, a uniform of invisibility that Brittany had handpicked to erase me. But while she was off dreaming of her society wedding, I was waiting for the ammunition that would blow her fairy tale to kingdom come. A knock at the door broke my trance. It was a rhythmic, confident rap, not the frantic pounding of my desperate son or the entitled banging of his fiancée. I opened it to find Solomon standing there looking out of place in this rundown corridor with his Italian wool coat and a thick leather briefcase. He stepped inside his nose, wrinkling slightly at the smell of stale tobacco smoke that seemed baked into the drywall. "You really are committing to the role, Mose," he said, placing the briefcase on the wobbly table. "This place is a dump." "It is part of the ambiance, Solomon," I said, pulling up the only chair. "Tell me what you found. Tell me I am not crazy." Solomon sat on the edge of the bed, opening his case. He pulled out a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression grave but tinged with the excitement of a hunter who just bagged a trophy buck. "You are not crazy, Mose," he said. "You are right. You are right about everything. In fact, you underestimated them." He slid a glossy photograph across the table. It was a picture of the sprawling estate in the Hamptons that Brittany had been bragging about for months, the ancestral home, the seat of the Vance dynasty. "Nice house," I said. "It is," Solomon agreed. "It is also listed on Airbnb for $2,000 a night. It belongs to a dentist from New Jersey. The Vances rented it for a week last summer to take photos for their social media. They do not own it. They do not own anything in the Hamptons." I felt a cold smile tug at the corner of my mouth. I knew it. And the parents, Franklin and Veronica Solomon, chuckled a dry, humorless sound. Franklin Vance filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 3 years ago in Florida. His construction business went under after he was sued for using substandard materials. They lost their primary residence. They are currently living in a rented condo in Queens, but they tell everyone it is their city pied-à-terre while the main house is being renovated. They are drowning Mose. They have maxed out every credit card they can get their hands on. That Rolls-Royce they drive, it is a lease, and they are 2 months behind on the payments. The repo man has an active order on it. "So they are frauds," I said, leaning back. "They are grifters looking for a mark. And they found one in my son." "They found a mark they thought was rich," Solomon corrected. "They think Jamal is the golden goose. They think he has access to your hidden millions, or that you are going to die soon and leave him a fortune. They are pushing this wedding because they need a bailout. They need Jamal's credit to pay off their own debts before the walls close in." It all made sense. The rush, the hostility toward me when I did not cough up the cash. They were terrified. They were cornered animals snapping at anyone who threatened their survival. "But that is not the worst of it," Mose Solomon said, his voice dropping. He reached into the bottom of the briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He hesitated before sliding it over to me. "You need to see this, but promise me you won't have a heart attack." I picked up the paper. It was a loan application. A secured loan for $50,000 from a private lender, high interest, fast cash. The purpose was listed as jewelry purchase, a diamond ring. I looked at the collateral section. My heart stopped. Written there in black and white was the address of my garage, Carter Classics, the land, the building, the inventory. And at the bottom, next to the borrower's signature, was a scrawl that made my stomach turn. It was my name, Moses Carter. But it was not my hand. The loop on the C was too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a forgery, a clumsy, desperate forgery. "Jamal," I whispered. "He forged your signature," Mose Solomon said softly. "He put up your livelihood, your legacy as collateral to buy a ring for a woman who calls you filthy. He stole the deed from your office filing cabinet, the copy you keep in the front, not the original in the safe, and he tried to mortgage your life." I stared at the paper. The betrayal was so sharp it felt physical, like a knife twisting between my ribs. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I sat up with when he had a fever. He was willing to sell me out for a rock. He was willing to risk the roof over my head so he could play the big man for a family of liars. "If this goes through," Solomon said, "and he defaults, which he will, they take the garage. They take the cars. They take everything. He won't default, I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears, because I am not going to let him. Before I could say anything else, my personal cell phone rang. It was not Jamal. It was a number I recognized immediately. It was Mr. Henderson, the senior loan officer at First City Bank. He handled my commercial accounts. He was one of the few people who knew the true extent of my holdings. I held up a hand to Solomon and answered the phone. "Hello, Frank? Mr. Carter?" Frank Henderson's voice was cheerful, deferential. "I apologize for disturbing you so late, but we had a flag on a loan application that just came across the urgent desk. It is for a secured personal loan, $50,000. The collateral listed is the commercial property on 5th Street. I closed my eyes. The forged application. It had hit the system. "Yes, Frank," I said. "I am aware of it." "Okay, good," Frank said, sounding relieved. The signature looked a bit rushed. "We just wanted to verbally confirm before we release the funds. Given your substantial standing with us and your Tier 1 credit rating, the system auto-approved it pending this call. The funds are set to wire to a Jamal Carter's account within the hour. Should I push the button?" I looked at Solomon. I looked at the forged document on the table. I had a choice. I could tell Frank it was fraud. I could stop the transfer right now. Jamal would be humiliated. He would lose the ring. The wedding might stop. But that was too easy. That was a slap on the wrist. Jamal had tried to steal my life. He needed to understand the weight of that crime. He needed to feel the crushing burden of debt without the safety net of his father's hard work. "Frank," I said, my voice steady as a rock, "I want you to approve the disbursement. Release the $50,000 to Jamal." Solomon's eyes widened. He started to shake his head, mouthing no, but I ignored him. "However, Frank," I continued, "there is a clerical error on the application regarding the collateral." "Oh," Frank asked. "Yes. I am removing the 5th Street property from the liability agreement. I am engaging a substitution clause. I want the loan to be unsecured by my assets." "Mr. Carter." Frank hesitated. "That changes the risk profile significantly. If we remove the real estate collateral, the interest rate jumps to 25%, and the borrower becomes personally liable for the full amount immediately upon default. We would have to attach it to his personal future earnings and any assets in his name." "I know," I said. "Do it. Shift the collateral to Jamal Carter's personal liability. Attach it to his social security number. Attach it to his car. Attach it to his future wages. If he defaults, you do not come after my garage. You go after him. You garnish his check until he is 90. "I understand," Sir Frank said slowly. He knew something was playing out, something personal, but he knew better than to ask. "You are co-signing then?" "No," I said. "I am validating the identity of the borrower. I am confirming he is who he says he is. But I am not co-signing. You are lending this money to Jamal Carter based on his potential, not my property. If the system needs a nudge because of his credit score, use my override authorization code Alpha 9 Zulu, but keep my name off the hook. He stands alone on this." "Understood, Mr. Carter. I will update the terms and release the funds. He will get his money in 10 minutes. Thank you, Frank." I hung up the phone. The room was silent. Solomon was staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. "You just let him hang himself," Solomon whispered. "You gave him $50,000 of rope." "I did not give him anything," I said, standing up and walking to the window. "He wanted to play the big shot. He wanted to mortgage a business he didn't build. Well, now he has his money. He can buy his ring. He can impress his in-laws. But that money isn't free anymore. It is not backed by Daddy's garage. It is backed by his own skin. But the interest rate mows. 25% if he misses a payment. When he misses a payment," I corrected. "He will miss it. He has no job. He has no income. And as of yesterday, he has no support from me. The bank will eat him alive. They will take his car. They will sue him. He will be bankrupt before his first anniversary. It is harsh, Mose. He is your son. He ceased to be my son when he forged my name to sell my life's work," I said, turning back to the table. "He is a criminal now, and I am just the witness." I looked down at the gray janitor's uniform. It seemed even more fitting now. I was about to clean up a mess that had been festering for years. "Solomon," I said, "pack up the files. We have one more stop to make before the wedding tomorrow. Where to the bank. I need to make a withdrawal, and then I need you to draft a new will, one that leaves everything, the garage, the land, the trust to the inner city. Youth mechanic program I started last year. You are disinheriting him. He disinherited himself. Solomon, I am just filing the paperwork." I picked up the forged loan application and folded it neatly, placing it in my pocket. It was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Tomorrow at the wedding, when I revealed who really owned the ground they walked on, I would have this in my pocket. If Jamal tried to play the victim, if he tried to claim he was a good son, mistreated by a cruel father, I would pull this out. I would show the world that while they were calling me filthy, they were the ones with dirty hands. "Go home, Solomon," I said. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I have a wedding to attend, and I have some floors to sweep." Solomon nodded, closed his briefcase, and walked out. I was alone again in the motel room. I touched the patch on the uniform. Staff. Yes, I was the staff. I was the executioner. And the guillotine was sharp-oiled and ready to drop. I walked into the private dining room of the Gilded Steer 10 minutes late, wearing a suit I had bought from a Salvation Army rack in 1998. It was a muddy brown polyester blend that smelled faintly of mothballs and other people's bad luck. It was tight across the shoulders and loose in the waist, a garment designed to strip a man of his dignity. I had even made sure to leave a smudge of engine grease on the left cuff just to complete the picture. If they wanted a character, I was going to give them a performance worthy of Broadway. The room was dimly lit, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that dripped light onto tables laden with silver and fine china. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and roasted meats. At the center of it all, holding court at a long table draped in white linen, were the Vances. Franklin and Veronica sat on high-backed chairs like a king and queen presiding over a feast they had not paid for. The conversation died the moment I stepped onto the plush carpet. It wasn't a gradual silence. It was instant, like someone had cut the power. 30 heads turned. 30 pairs of eyes scanned me from my scuffed work boots to my out-of-style lapels. I saw the sneers. I saw the elbows nudging ribs. I saw Brittany bring a napkin to her mouth to hide a smile that was anything but kind. "There he is," Franklin Vance boomed, standing up. His voice projected to the back of the room, loud and theatrical. "Everyone look who decided to grace us with his presence. It is Moses, the patriarch of the Carter clan." He said patriarch like it was a punchline. I walked toward them, clutching my old hat in my hands, keeping my eyes lowered. "I am sorry I am late," I mumbled, affecting a slight stoop in my posture. The bus was running behind. The bus, Veronica shrieked with laughter, clutching her husband's arm. "Did you hear that, Franklin?" He took the bus. "Oh, that is just quaint. It is so authentic." Franklin walked around the table. He was wearing a tuxedo that shone under the lights, his wrist heavy with a gold watch that I knew, thanks to Solomon, was a high-quality replica. He clapped a hand on my shoulder hard. "Do not worry about it, old-timer," he said, steering me away from the head table. "We saved a spot for you. We figured you would be more comfortable down here, with your own speed." He guided me to the far end of the room, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. There was a small, round folding table set up there separate from the main banquet. Seated around it were 4 children, all under the age of 7, and a nanny who looked bored out of her mind. There was one empty folding chair. "Here you go," Franklin said, pulling the chair out. "The kids' table. We thought you would fit right in. Less pressure to know which fork is the salad fork, right?" The room erupted in polite, cruel laughter. I looked at Jamal. He was sitting at the right hand of Franklin Vance, staring intently at the bubbles in his champagne glass. He did not look up. He did not stand up. He let his father be seated with toddlers while he drank with the wolves. I sat down. The chair creaked under my weight. A little boy with chocolate on his face stared at me. "Are you the babysitter?" he asked. "No, son," I said softly. "I am the grandfather." Franklin returned to his seat, looking satisfied. He tapped his glass with a spoon, demanding attention. The room went quiet again. "As we enjoy this magnificent meal," Franklin announced, gesturing to the waiters who were bringing out trays of appetizers, "I think it is important to reflect on where we come from, or rather where some of us have escaped from." He looked down the table at Jamal. "You see, success is a mindset. It is about refinement. It is about taste." He picked up a cracker topped with a black, oily substance. "Hey, Moses," he shouted down the length of the room. "Can you hear me back there over the kitchen noise?" I looked up, meeting his gaze. "Yes," I said. "I hear you." "Have you ever had caviar?" he asked, holding the cracker up like a holy relic. "Real beluga." "The good stuff." "No," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I have not. I figured." Franklin chuckled, popping the cracker into his mouth. I bet you are more of a, what is it, fried chicken and catfish man? Grease and grits? The racial undertone was not subtle. It was a sledgehammer. Veronica giggled shrilly. Oh, Franklin, be nice. His palate is just rustic. You cannot expect him to appreciate the complexities of imported roe. He probably thinks fine dining is when the ketchup comes in a glass bottle. The guests laughed again. It was a sound I would never forget. It was the sound of people who thought they were untouchable. I slowly reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out my phone, keeping it hidden under the edge of the tablecloth. I pressed record. Keep talking, I thought. Please keep talking. Franklin, emboldened by the laughter, poured himself another glass of wine. You know, he continued, his voice slurring slightly. It is a charity, really. What we are doing. Taking Jamal in, elevating him, giving him a name that opens doors. Because, let's be honest, the Carter name. What does that get you? A discount at the auto parts store? He looked at Jamal. Son, you are lucky. You are marrying up. You are washing off the stain of that garage. You are becoming a Vance, and that means you leave the dirt behind. Jamal nodded. He actually nodded. You are right, Franklin, he said, his voice weak but audible. I am grateful. I really am. I felt a cold fire in my gut. My son was apologizing for his existence. He was thanking a bankrupt con artist for the privilege of marrying his equally bankrupt daughter. The waiters brought the main course. For the main table, it was filet mignon and lobster tail. For the kids' table, it was a plate of chicken nuggets and French fries. The waiter placed the plastic plate in front of me. He looked apologetic. Sorry, sir, he whispered. This is what the order said. It is fine, I said. Thank you. I picked up a nugget. I took a bite. It was cold. I chewed slowly, my eyes fixed on Franklin Vance. So Franklin said, leaning back, let's talk about the honeymoon. The Maldives. First class. Nothing but the best for my little girl. I assume, Moses, that you have never left the state. Do you even have a passport? I have traveled, I said quietly. To where? The next county. Franklin laughed. We are talking about the world, Moses. Culture. History. Things you cannot learn under the hood of a Chevy. But do not worry. We will send you a postcard. Maybe you can hang it in your shop. Inspire the customers. Veronica leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. If he can even read it, she whispered loudly enough for half the table to hear. I recorded it all. The mockery regarding my education, the insults about my profession, the slurs about my heritage masked as jokes. I recorded their boasts about their investments in Europe, their estates in the Hamptons, their connections in Washington. Every lie they told was another bar in the cell I was building for them. As the dinner wound down and the dessert was served, creme brulee for them, a scoop of vanilla ice cream for me. Jamal finally stood up. He looked pale. He excused himself and walked toward the restrooms, passing my table. He stopped. He did not look at me. He looked at the wall above my head. Dad, he whispered, his voice tight with shame and anger. You are embarrassing me. I am eating my dinner, Jamal, I said calmly. You look like a hobo, he hissed. And why are you staring at them? Stop staring. You are making them uncomfortable. They seem pretty comfortable to me, son, I said. They seem to be enjoying themselves. Just finish up, he said. And when you are done, do not linger. Go out the back door. Go wait in your truck. I do not want you mingling during the coffee hour. You smell like old oil and mothballs. It is making Brittany nauseous. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had carried to bed when he fell asleep on the couch. The boy I had taught to tie his shoes. Is that what you want? I asked. You want me to wait in the truck like a dog? I want you to not ruin this for me, he snapped, his voice rising just enough for the nanny to look over. This is my chance, Dad. My chance to be someone. Do not drag me back down to your level. Just go. And tomorrow, stick to the script. You are the gardener. You are the help. Do not try to be my father. Not tomorrow. He walked away. He walked back to the table of liars and thieves, sat down and smiled as Franklin poured him another glass of wine bought with stolen credit. I finished my ice cream. I wiped my mouth with the paper napkin. I stood up. The little boy next to me looked up. Are you leaving, Grandpa? Yes, son, I said. I have work to do. I walked out of the room. I did not look back at the head table. I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, startling a busboy. I walked past the stoves and the prep tables, out the back service door, and into the alley where the dumpsters were kept. The night air was cool. I walked to my truck parked in the shadows of the alley. I climbed in and sat there for a moment in the silence. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it The Vance Family Values. Then I pulled out the file Solomon had given me. I looked at the foreclosure notice on the Hamptons house. I looked at the repossession order for the Rolls-Royce. I looked at the bankruptcy filings. They wanted to talk about culture. They wanted to talk about class. I started the engine. I had one more stop to make tonight. I was going to the bank. I was going to withdraw a very specific amount of cash. And then I was going to make a phone call to the real owner of the Hamptons estate, a man Solomon had told me was desperate to sell the debt on the property. I was going to buy their lies. I was going to buy their debt. I was going to buy the very ground they stood on. And tomorrow, when Franklin Vance stood up to give his speech, I was going to pull the chair out from under him. I put the truck in gear and drove away. The taste of the cold chicken nugget was still in my mouth, bitter and dry, but as I drove I began to smile. It was a cold, hard smile. "Enjoy the caviar, Franklin," I whispered to the empty cab. "It is the last expensive meal you are going to eat for a very, very long time." The morning sun was barely crowning the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across the loading dock of the Sapphire Springs Resort. I had arrived before the caterers, before the florists, and certainly before the guests. I was not there as the owner today. I was there as the help. I had traded my tailored Italian suits for a gray polyester jumpsuit that smelled of industrial starch and someone else's sweat. The name patch on the chest read "Staff." It was tight across my shoulders, a physical reminder of the box they were trying to put me in. I was sweeping the rear corridor near the kitchen when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jamal. "Meet us in the staff break room. Now. Do not let anyone see you." I leaned the broom against the wall and walked toward the small windowless room at the back of the service hallway. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I knew this meeting was not about family bonding. It was an ambush. When I pushed the door open, the air in the room felt suffocating thick with the smell of stale coffee and expensive perfume. Brittany was there, pacing back and forth in a white silk robe with the word bride bedazzled in rhinestones across the back. She looked like a predator circling a trap. Jamal was sitting on a folding metal chair in the corner, his head in his hands, looking like a man waiting for a guillotine to drop. "You are late," Brittany snapped without turning around. She checked her diamond watch, the one I knew Jamal had bought, with a credit card that was currently frozen. "We do not have time for your slow pace today, Moses. We have a schedule." I stood in the doorway, letting the gray uniform do the talking. I did not apologize. I just waited. She turned to me, then her eyes scanning my outfit with a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She reached onto the wobbly break room table and picked up a clipboard. She shoved it toward my chest. "Sign this," she commanded. I looked down at the paper. It was a dense legal document, the kind written in small print designed to hide big lies. I adjusted my glasses and began to read. It was a voluntary admission and asset surrender agreement for the Pineview State Assisted Living Facility. My blood ran cold. Pineview. I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. It was a state-run facility on the other side of the county known for understaffing bed sores and the smell of urine that bleach could never quite mask. It was where people went when they had no one left to fight for them. "What is this?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "It is your new home," Brittany said, her voice clipped and efficient. "Jamal and I have made the arrangements. A bed opened up this morning. The van will be here to pick you up tomorrow at noon, right after we leave for our honeymoon." I looked at Jamal. He was staring at his shoes, rubbing his palms together as if trying to wash away a stain. "Jamal," I asked, "you agreed to this?" He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy. "Just sign it, Dad," he mumbled. "It is for the best. We cannot afford to take care of you, not with everything else going on. You have no money. You have no house. You are a burden, Dad. This way the state takes care of you. You will have meals. You will have a bed. It is better than the street. Better than the street." That was the bar he had set for his father, the man who had put him through private school, the man who had bought him his first car. "But Pineview," I said, injecting a tremor of fear into my voice. "I heard stories about that place. They say people die alone there. You are being dramatic." Brittany cut in, tapping a manicured fingernail against the clipboard. "It is a roof over your head. It is more than you deserve after embarrassing us. You have nothing, Moses. You are destitute. We are offering you a solution. Now sign the paper so we can get on with our wedding. We need to focus on our future, not your past." "Our future," Jamal echoed, his voice gaining a little strength fueled by her arrogance. "Yeah, we have big plans, Dad. We are moving up." I looked from my son to the woman who controlled him. I saw the greed in her eyes. I saw the weakness in his. And I knew that the time for mercy had passed. Moving up, I asked softly. "Yes." Brittany gloated, a smug smile spreading across her face. "We are closing on a property next week, a real home, not a dump like yours. We are moving into the penthouse at the Meridian." The Meridian. I felt a jolt of recognition that I carefully kept off my face. The Meridian was a 40-story luxury tower downtown. I knew it well. I knew the foundation was reinforced concrete. I knew the lobby was Italian marble. I knew the HVAC system was top of the line. I knew all of this because I built it. My holding company, Carter Development Group, had constructed the Meridian 8 years ago. I still owned the top 5 floors. I kept the penthouses as rental units for visiting dignitaries or corporate clients. I had never put them on the market for sale, which meant Jamal hadn't bought it. He was being scammed, or he was scamming someone else to get a lease. "The penthouse?" I asked, feigning awe. "That sounds expensive." "It is," Jamal said, puffed up with false pride. "It is a multi-million-dollar property, Dad. Floor-to-ceiling windows, views of the entire city. I made it happen. I pulled some strings. I leveraged some assets. I am a businessman, Dad. I know how to make deals." I looked at him. I knew exactly what deal he had made. David, my assistant, had flagged a suspicious application for Unit 4001 just 2 days ago. An LLC called Vance Global had applied for a lease-to-own agreement backed by a fraudulent letter of credit from a bank in the Cayman Islands. David had asked me if I wanted to reject it immediately. I had told him to wait. I had told him to let it sit in the system pending approval. "So you think you own it?" I asked. "We do," Brittany interrupted. "The keys are waiting for us. As soon as we get back from the Maldives, we are moving in. That is why we cannot have you hanging around Moses. The Meridian has standards. We cannot have a broke mechanic crashing on our Italian leather sofas." I looked at the clipboard again. I looked at the line that required my signature to surrender my freedom. They wanted to lock me away in a state facility while they lived in my building using fraudulent money to rent my property. The irony was so sharp it almost cut me. "Okay," I said, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. "If this is what you want, if this is the only way." "It is," Jamal said quickly. "Just sign it, Dad, please." I reached for the cheap ballpoint pen Brittany was holding out. My hand shook. I made sure of it. I let the tip of the pen hover over the paper. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed my entire life. Jamal knew this. He had watched me throw a baseball. He had watched me turn a wrench. But as I touched the pen to the paper, I switched it to my left hand. I gripped the pen awkwardly, my knuckles white. I began to scratch out my name. The letters were jagged, uneven, and barely legible. It looked like the signature of a man suffering from a severe neurological decline. Or to a court of law, it looked like a signature made under duress by a hand that was not the signer's dominant one. It was a signature that any decent lawyer could get thrown out in 5 minutes. "There," I said, dropping the pen. It clattered onto the table. "It is done." Brittany snatched the clipboard away before the ink was even dry. She glanced at the signature, not caring about the quality, only caring that the line was filled. Finally, she huffed. That was harder than it needed to be. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Now get out of here," she said. "The caterers need this room. Go find a broom or a mop, make yourself useful, and stay out of sight until the reception. I do not want the guests seeing the janitor before the champagne is poured." I stood up. I looked at my son one last time. He was looking at the commitment papers, a look of relief washing over his face. He thought he was free. He thought he had solved the problem of his father. I walked out of the break room. I walked back into the bustling kitchen. The noise of the pots and pans, the shouting of the chefs, it all faded into the background. I reached into the deep pocket of my jumpsuit and pulled out my phone. I typed a text message to David. Subject Unit 4001, The Meridian. Message: reject the application for Vance Global immediately. Flag the applicant for fraud. Contact the district attorney's office regarding the forged letter of credit. And David, have the locks changed on the unit today, just in case they try to get in. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Sent. Jamal thought he was moving into a palace. He was about to find out he was homeless. And Brittany, she thought she was marrying a tycoon. She was marrying a felon. I put the phone away and walked over to the janitor's closet. I grabbed a push broom. The bristles were stiff and worn. I started to sweep the hallway leading to the ballroom. Back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm was hypnotic. I was the janitor. I was the help. I was the dirt beneath their feet. But in a few hours, when I took that microphone, I was going to be the storm that washed them all away. They wanted to talk about cleaning up. I was just getting started. The trash needed to be taken out, and I was the man for the job. The sun had not yet burned off the morning mist when I pulled my rusted Ford truck up to the service gate of the Sapphire Springs Resort. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, heavy and gray, matching the polyester jumpsuit I had zipped up over my frame. I had left my Italian silk suits and my gold cufflinks in the safe. Today I was not Moses Carter, the owner of a real estate empire. Today I was just Mose the help. The name tag on my chest was crooked, pinned there with shaking hands, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage that had settled deep in my bones. I rolled down the window as the guard booth approached. The air smelled of manicured lawns and money, a scent I knew well because I paid for every blade of grass on this 200-acre property. The guard was a young man I did not recognize, likely a contract hire for the event. He looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing as he took in my battered truck and my gray uniform. He did not see the man. He saw the rust. He saw the color of my skin. He saw the uniform. "Hold it right there, Pops," he said, stepping out of the booth and holding up a hand. "You are lost. Deliveries are around the back, and we are not accepting anything until after 10. Turn it around." I kept my hands on the wheel, feeling the vibration of the engine. "I am not a delivery," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am staff. I was hired for the Carter wedding." The guard laughed, a short, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "Staff." He picked up a clipboard and scanned it, not really looking. "I do not have any new hires on the list. And even if I did, you cannot bring that heap in here. The bride left very specific instructions this morning." He leaned in closer, his face twisting into a sneer. "She said she does not want any raggedy elements ruining the aesthetic of her arrival. Her exact words were, 'Keep the trash out of sight.' And looking at this truck and looking at you, I would say you fit the description. So back it up. Park in the overflow lot 3 miles down the road and walk in if you want the job. Otherwise, get lost." The trash. She had called me trash, not just to my face, but to the hired security. She had institutionalized her disrespect. I felt a muscle jump in my jaw. I could have reached into my glove box, pulled out the deed to the property, and fired him on the spot. I could have driven through the gate and dared him to stop me, but that would ruin the play. And I was committed to the performance. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply picked up my phone from the passenger seat. "Who are you calling?" the guard asked, resting his hand on his baton. I said, "Move along." I dialed a private number. It rang once. "Arthur," I said. "It is Moses. I am at the North Service Gate. Your security guard seems to think I am a health hazard. He is refusing me entry based on the bride's protocols regarding trash." There was a silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of something shattering like a coffee cup hitting the floor. "Mr. Carter." Arthur's voice was strangled. "You are here. Why are you at the service gate? I have the presidential suite prepped. I have the champagne on ice." "I am not here for champagne, Arthur," I said, watching the guard's smug face. "I am here to work. Just get down here. Now." And Arthur, do not make a scene. I hung up. The guard was staring at me, shaking his head. "You think calling your supervisor is going to help, buddy? I take orders from the wedding planner, not the shift manager. You are wasting your time." I said nothing. I just stared straight ahead at the wrought iron gates of my property. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Exactly 4 minutes later, a white golf cart came careening down the winding driveway. It was moving so fast 2 wheels lifted off the ground on the curve. Arthur was driving his tie, flapping over his shoulder, his face pale as a sheet. He slammed on the brakes, the cart skidding to a halt inches from the guard booth. He jumped out, stumbling slightly. "Open the gate," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Open the gate right now." The guard blinked, confused by the general manager's panic. "But sir, this guy, he is not on the list. The bride said—" "I do not care what the bride said," Arthur yelled, running to the keypad and punching in the override code himself. "This man has full access. Do you understand me? Full access. If he wants to park in the lobby, let him." The heavy gates groaned and swung open. Arthur ran to the window of my truck. He looked at my gray jumpsuit. He looked at the staff patch. He looked like he wanted to cry. "Mr. Carter," he whispered, leaning in so the guard couldn't hear. "I am so sorry. I had no idea you were dressed like this. Please let me take you to the office. Let me get you a suit. You cannot go in there like this. They will treat you like the help I finished for him." "That is the point, Arthur." "But sir, why?" "Because I need to see what happens when they think no one is watching," I said. "Listen to me closely, Arthur. This is an order. You will treat me as a janitor. You will not address me as sir. You will not offer me water. You will tell your staff I am a temp named Mose. If anyone asks, I am here to sweep the floors. Do you understand?" Arthur swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "But the disrespect. I cannot let them treat you." "You will let them do whatever they want," I said, my voice hardening. "Because when I take that microphone later today, I want the bill to be full. I want the receipt to be long. Now where can I hide this truck?" Arthur pointed a shaking hand toward a loading dock behind the industrial kitchens. "Park there," he said. "It is out of sight." "Thank you, Arthur. Now go back to your office. And remember, bring the microphone when I signal, not a second before." I put the truck in gear and drove past the stunned guard who was now standing at attention, looking like he had just seen a ghost. I drove around the back of the massive resort, past the fountains I had designed, past the gardens I had paid for. I parked next to the dumpsters. It was fitting. That is where Brittany wanted me. I walked into the kitchen through the service door. The heat hit me instantly, a wall of steam and the smell of roasting meat. The kitchen was chaos. Chefs were shouting, pans were clanging, waiters were running back and forth with trays of silver. No one looked at me. I was invisible. I was just a gray uniform in a sea of white coats. I grabbed a broom from the corner. It felt familiar in my hands. Honest work. I started sweeping the hallway that led to the main ballroom. Back and forth. The rhythm was soothing. I made my way to the edge of the ballroom. I stood in the shadows of the service entrance holding my broom like a staff. The room was breathtaking. I had spared no expense when I renovated it. Crystal chandeliers, silk drapes, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. It was a palace, and today it was filled with people who were unworthy of it. The guests were arriving. I saw the Vances pull up in a line of stretch limousines. I knew for a fact the credit card used to book them had been declined an hour ago, but the limo company hadn't called the driver yet. Franklin Vance stepped out looking like a peacock, shaking hands, laughing too loudly. Veronica was beside him, looking down her nose at the floral arrangements, and then I saw Jamal. He was standing at the altar, waiting. He looked sharp in his tuxedo. He looked like the son I had raised to be a prince. But his posture was wrong. He was hunched, sweating his eyes, darting around the room like a trapped animal. He wasn't looking at his bride. He was looking at the doors. He was looking for me. Or maybe he was praying I wouldn't show up. The music swelled. The heavy doors opened. Brittany appeared. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first home. She looked stunning. She looked triumphant. She walked down the aisle, soaking in the applause, the envy, the attention. She reached the altar and took Jamal's hand. Before the priest could speak, she turned her head. She scanned the room. She was checking her kingdom. Her eyes swept over the senators, the fake business tycoons, the friends she barely liked, and then her gaze stopped. She saw me. I was standing by the kitchen doors, holding my broom and a dustpan. I was wearing the gray polyester. I looked exactly like the trash she had tried to throw out. For a second, her mask slipped. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp of rage. She looked at Jamal and elbowed him hard. Jamal looked up. He saw me too. He went pale. He looked like he was going to vomit. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just nodded. A slow, deliberate nod. "I am here," I mouthed. I saw Brittany whisper something to him. I saw her hiss a command. She was furious that I hadn't used the back door that I dared to be visible in her perfect picture. But she couldn't make a scene now, not with everyone watching. She had to swallow it. She had to turn back to the priest and say her vows while the man she called filthy stood 20 feet away, holding the keys to her destruction in his pocket. The ceremony began. I leaned on my broom and waited. I listened to them promise to love and cherish each other. I listened to the lies. And I waited for the reception, because that was when the staff got to speak. That was when the janitor took out the trash. The reception began an hour later in the grand ballroom. It was a spectacle of excess, a room dripping in crystal and gold paid for by a credit card that was already dead. The air smelled of expensive lilies and roast beef, but to me, standing in the shadows near the service entrance, it smelled like impending doom. I held my broom like a sentry holding a spear. I was invisible to them. The waiters brushed past me without a glance. The guests, flushed with open-bar champagne, looked right through the gray polyester jumpsuit. I was part of the furniture, a necessary blemish on the periphery of their perfect day. I watched from my vantage point as Franklin Vance worked the room, shaking hands with people he owed money to, laughing too loudly, acting the part of the billionaire patriarch. Veronica was holding court at table 1, critiquing the centerpiece while secretly checking her phone, probably wondering why her card had been declined at the hair salon that morning. And then there was the head table, the throne. Brittany sat in the center, her dress taking up 2 chairs, glowing with the satisfaction of a conqueror. Jamal sat next to her, looking small. He drank his champagne quickly, his eyes darting toward the doors, toward the exits, anywhere but at me. The speeches began. The best man, a college buddy of Jamal's who clearly didn't know the bride well, mumbled through a toast about love and destiny. The maid of honor cried about how Brittany was the most generous soul she knew. I gripped the broom handle tighter. Generous. That was a word they liked to use. Then Brittany stood up. She tapped her spoon against her glass. The sharp, high-pitched sound cut through the murmur of the crowd. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the bride. She looked radiant, I had to give her that. But it was the radiance of a nuclear blast, bright and destructive. She took the wireless microphone from the DJ. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice amplified, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "It means the world to us to be surrounded by people of such quality, people of such class." She paused for effect, letting her gaze sweep over the room. Then her eyes found me. I was standing by the swinging kitchen doors next to a large gray trash bin on wheels. I didn't move. I didn't look away. "You know," she continued, her voice taking on a syrupy theatrical tone, "family is everything to me, and when I married Jamal today, I accepted all of him, including his roots, even the parts that are a little withered." A few people chuckled politely, unsure of where this was going. Jamal froze his glass halfway to his mouth. He knew. He saw where she was looking. He put the glass down, his hand trembling. "My father-in-law is here today," Brittany announced. A murmur went through the crowd. People started looking around, expecting to see a man in a tuxedo standing up to wave. They didn't see anyone. "Oh, he is not sitting with you." Brittany laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "You see, Jamal's father, Moses, has had a hard life. He has spent 50 years working in a garage. He is a simple man, a very simple man. And unfortunately, life hasn't been kind to his bank account or his hygiene." The room went dead silent. The discomfort was palpable. Franklin Vance smirked from the front row. "But I have a big heart," Brittany said, placing a hand on her chest. "I couldn't just leave him on the street. I couldn't let him starve while we feasted. So I made a decision. I decided to give him a purpose. I decided to let him earn his keep." She raised her hand and pointed. A long, manicured finger aimed straight at my chest. "Everyone, please look to the back of the room, by the kitchen doors. That is Moses." 300 heads turned. 300 pairs of eyes landed on me. They saw the old black man in the gray jumpsuit. They saw the broom in my hand. They saw the staff patch on my chest. "There he is," Brittany cooed. "Isn't that sweet?" He felt so out of place among such refinement that he begged me for a job. He told me, "Brittany, I am too dirty to sit at a table. I smell like oil. Please, just let me sweep the floor so I can be near my son." And because I am a benevolent person, I said yes. She looked at me, her eyes flashing with malice. "So let's give him a round of applause, everyone. Let's clap for Moses the janitor. It is the only way he could afford to be here today." For a second, nobody moved. Then Franklin Vance started clapping, slow, loud claps. Then Veronica joined in. Then the bridesmaids. And slowly peer pressure took over. The room filled with applause. It wasn't a celebration, it was a spectacle. They were clapping for the monkey in the cage. They were clapping for the charity case. I looked at Jamal. This was his moment. This was his last chance to be a man. His wife had just humiliated his father in front of everyone he knew. She had turned me into a prop for her ego. All he had to do was stand up. All he had to do was take the microphone and say, "Stop. That is my father." But he didn't. Jamal sat there. He looked at the tablecloth. He forced a smile, a weak, sick grimace. He nodded along, validating her lie. He let the applause wash over him, accepting the price of admission to her world. That was it. The last thread connecting us snapped. The sound was deafening in my own head, louder than the applause. My son was dead. The man sitting there was just a stranger in a rented suit. I leaned the broom against the wall. It made a hollow thud. I let go of the handle. I brushed my hands off on my thighs, smoothing the polyester fabric. I took a step forward, then another. I started walking down the center aisle between the round tables. The applause faltered. It died away, replaced by a confused murmuring. Why was the janitor walking toward the head table? Was he going to clean up a spill? I kept walking. My boots were heavy, but my steps were light. I locked eyes with Brittany. She was still holding the microphone, her smile frozen on her face. She looked confused. Then as I got closer, the confusion turned to annoyance. "Moses," she hissed into the mic, forgetting it was still on. Her voice boomed through the speakers. "What are you doing? Go back to your station. You are ruining the aesthetic." I didn't stop. I walked past the senators. I walked past the fake tycoons. I walked past Franklin Vance, whose mouth was hanging open. Security Brittany shouted, her voice rising in panic. "Someone get him. He is senile. He is wandering." 2 security guards stepped out from the side walls. They started toward me, but then they stopped. They looked at me. They looked at my face. I wasn't Moses the janitor anymore. I was Moses Carter, the man who had built this room, the man who signed their paychecks. I gave them a look, a single hard look that said, "Stay back if you want a job tomorrow." They froze. They backed off. The room gasped. Brittany looked around, realizing her guards weren't moving. She looked back at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. She realized that the old man she had kicked was not staying down. I reached the steps of the stage. I walked up them slowly, deliberately. I stood in front of the head table. I towered over them. Jamal looked up at me. "Dad, please," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Just go back. Do not do this." I ignored him. I reached out and took the microphone from Brittany's hand. She was so shocked she didn't even fight me for it. Her fingers went limp. I held the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw curiosity. I saw pity. I saw judgment. I cleared my throat. The sound echoed like thunder. "Thank you for that introduction, Brittany," I said. My voice was deep calm and commanded absolute silence. "You are right about one thing. I am a simple man. I work with my hands. I fix things that are broken." I paused. I looked down at her. She was trembling. "But you got a few details wrong," I continued. "You said I begged for a job because I was too poor to sit at a table. You said I was dirty. You said I was a charity case." I reached into the pocket of my jumpsuit. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the deed to the Sapphire Springs Resort. The original deed. Stamped, notarized, and undeniable. I unfolded it slowly. The crinkle of the paper was the only sound in the room. "I stood here and listened to you ask for applause for your benevolence," I said, "but I think it is time we clarified who exactly is receiving charity today." I turned the paper around and held it up. "My name is Moses Carter," I said, my voice rising, filling every corner of the room. "And I do not work here. I own this building. I own the land it sits on. I own the kitchen where you told me to eat. And I own the very stage you are standing on." The gasp from the audience was like all the air leaving the room at once. I looked at Franklin Vance. I looked at Veronica. I looked at Jamal. And most of all, I looked at Brittany, whose face had just drained of all color, leaving her looking like a ghost in a wedding dress. "You wanted a show," I asked her. "You wanted to talk about value. Let's talk." Because the janitor just clocked out. And the landlord is here to collect the rent. The sound of Brittany's voice screeching through the ballroom was like a cat being stepped on. It shattered the stunned silence that had fallen over the room after I took the microphone. "Security," she screamed, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "Get him out of here. Remove this man immediately. He is trespassing. He is harassing the bride. Get this filth out of my sight." She was pointing a trembling finger at me, her chest heaving beneath the silk and lace of her gown. She looked at the guests, her eyes pleading for someone, anyone, to intervene. But the guests were frozen. They were paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the moment. They looked from the hysterical bride to the calm, imposing figure of the janitor standing on the stage, and they did not know who to believe. Then the heavy double doors at the side of the ballroom burst open. 4 security guards marched in. They were big men dressed in black tactical uniforms, not the ceremonial blazers usually worn for weddings. These were my men. They were the private security team I kept on retainer for high-profile events, the team that guarded my garage when I had $10 million worth of inventory sitting on the floor. Brittany's face lit up with relief. She thought they were her saviors. She thought her screams had summoned the cavalry. Thank God, she gasped, smoothing her dress. Finally, do your jobs. Throw him in the alley where he belongs. The guards marched down the center aisle, their boots thudding in unison against the hardwood floor. They moved with a precision that was terrifying to behold. They reached the stage. They walked up the steps. Brittany stepped back, a smug smile returning to her lips. She folded her arms, waiting for the violence she felt she was owed. But the guards did not grab me. They did not reach for my arms. They did not push me toward the exit. Instead, they walked past me. They turned around, and they formed a wall. A solid, impenetrable wall of muscle and black fabric standing between me and the head table. They crossed their hands in front of them and stood at parade rest, facing outward, facing Brittany, facing Jamal, facing the Vances. They were not there to remove me. They were there to protect me. The smile slid off Brittany's face like oil off a hot pan. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the lead guard, a man named Marcus, whom I had known for 10 years. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are facing the wrong way. He is the intruder. He is the janitor. I gave you a direct order. Grab him." Marcus did not blink. He did not look at her. He looked straight ahead, his voice deep and projecting clearly to the first few rows. "We do not take orders from guests, ma'am. We take orders from the owner, and the owner is standing behind us." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Guest's owner. The whispers started again, louder this time, a buzzing hive of confusion. Brittany laughed. It was a manic, breathless sound. The owner. "Are you insane? He is a mechanic. He is broke. He barely has 2 nickels to rub together. I hired him to sweep the floor. Look at him. Look at his clothes." I stepped forward. The guards parted slightly, just enough to let me pass through their ranks. I stood at the edge of the stage, looking down at her. I still held the microphone. I still wore the gray jumpsuit. But my posture had changed. The slump was gone. The deferential head bow was gone. I stood at my full height, 6 feet and 2 inches of iron and resolve. I looked at the crowd. I saw the senators. I saw the business partners Franklin Vance had been trying to impress. I saw the sneers turning into looks of dawning realization. "You keep talking about my clothes, Brittany," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, calm and steady as a heartbeat. "You keep talking about my job. You keep talking about my value. You judge a man by the fabric on his back because you have never bothered to look at the man himself." I took a step closer to the table. Jamal was shaking so hard his water glass was rattling against the saucer. "You said you gave me a job today out of charity," I continued. "You said you were benevolent. You wanted applause for letting the poor old man sweep up your crumbs. Well, I want to thank you for that. Truly. Because sweeping these floors today reminded me of something important. It reminded me of how much work it took to build them." I signaled to the back of the room. Arthur, the general manager, was standing by the tech booth. He was sweating, but he nodded. He hit a button on the control panel. Behind me, a massive projection screen descended from the ceiling. It was supposed to be displaying a slideshow of Jamal and Brittany's relationship, a montage of their vacations and posed photos. Instead, the screen flickered to life with a high-definition image of a legal document. It was a deed. It was not just any deed. It was the master deed for the Sapphire Springs Resort and Spa. The text was large and crisp. It detailed the transfer of the property, the land, the structures, and all operational assets. It showed the purchase price a number with 7 zeros. And at the bottom, in bold, undeniable letters, was the name of the sole proprietor, Moses Carter. The room went silent. Not the polite silence of a dinner party, but the vacuum silence of a crypt. 300 people stared at the screen. They looked at the date on the deed. It was dated 3 years ago. I turned back to Brittany. She was staring at the screen, her eyes bulging. She looked like she was trying to read a language she did not understand. "I do not work here, Brittany," I said, my voice dropping to a register that vibrated the floorboards. "I own here. I own the kitchen where you sent me to eat. I own the ballroom where you are sitting. I own the chairs. I own the tables. I own the chandeliers. I own the very ground you are standing on." I walked over to the head table. I placed the microphone on the white tablecloth right next to the untouched wedding cake. "You tried to kick me out of my own house," I said. leaning in so only she and Jamal could hear the raw edge in my voice. You tried to humiliate me in my own kingdom. You thought because I have dirt under my fingernails that I am dirt. But let me tell you something about dirt, little girl. Dirt is where things grow. Dirt is foundation. And you are just a weed growing in my garden. Brittany looked at me. She looked at the screen. She looked at the guards. Her brain was trying to reconcile the image of the filthy mechanic with the reality of the multimillionaire landlord standing in front of her. It was too much. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her. No, she whispered. This is a trick. This is a prank. Jamal, tell him. Tell him to stop. She grabbed Jamal's arm, digging her nails into his tuxedo jacket. Jamal, say something. Tell them he is lying. Tell them he fixes cars. Jamal looked up at me. He looked at the deed on the screen. He knew his father's signature. He knew the truth. He had always suspected there was more money than I let on, but he had never imagined this. He had never imagined the scale. He is not lying. Jamal whispered, his voice sounding like it was coming from a grave. He always said he invested. I just didn't know. I didn't know it was this. Franklin Vance stood up then. His face was purple. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. Now see here, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. I do not care what piece of paper you printed off the internet. We have a contract. We paid a deposit. You cannot just hijack my daughter's wedding. I picked up the microphone again. I looked at Franklin. Contract. I asked, you mean the contract signed by Brittany Vance? The contract that had a clause regarding the code of conduct for guests and hosts. I pulled another piece of paper from my pocket. It was the event contract. Clause 14, Section B, I read aloud. The management reserves the right to terminate any event immediately and without refund if the behavior of the rental party is deemed abusive, discriminatory, or harassing toward the staff. I looked at Brittany. You called the staff filth. You called the staff trash. You harassed the staff. You humiliated the staff. And since I am the staff today, I ripped the contract in half. The sound was loud and final. I am exercising my right to terminate. This wedding is over. The crowd erupted. It was chaos. People were standing up, shouting, pointing. The illusion of the perfect society wedding had been shattered, replaced by the raw, ugly truth of who these people really were. Brittany let out a scream that sounded like a banshee. She lunged at me, her hands curled into claws. You cannot do this. You ruin everything. I hate you. Marcus, the lead guard, stepped in front of me. He did not touch her. He just stood there, a wall of stone. She bounced off his chest and stumbled back, tripping over the train of her dress. She fell to the floor in a heap of white tulle and rage. She sat there sobbing, looking up at me with hatred burning in her eyes. But underneath the hate, I saw something else. I saw the realization of what she had lost. She hadn't just lost a venue. She hadn't just lost a wedding. She had lost the lottery ticket she thought she had punched. I looked down at her. I looked at my son, who was still sitting in his chair, staring at the torn contract on the floor. You wanted a show, I said to the room. You wanted to see the janitor. Well, take a good look, because I am the one holding the keys. And I am closing up shop. I signaled to Arthur. Turn on the house lights, I said. The party is done. The crystal chandeliers blazed to full brightness, washing out the romantic mood lighting, exposing the stains on the carpet, the sweat on the faces, the ugliness of the moment. There were no shadows left to hide in. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the center of the stage. The guards flanked me. I was not the help anymore. I was the king, and I had just exiled the court. Liar! Franklin Vance roared. The veins in his neck were bulging like garden hoses against his starched white collar. He scrambled up from his chair, his movements jerky and desperate, knocking over a flute of champagne that shattered with a sharp crack on the hardwood floor. Shards of crystal skittered across the stage, glittering like diamonds in the stage lights. You are a liar and a fraud, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You printed that piece of paper at Kinko's. I know who you are. Moses Carter, you are a grease monkey. You change oil, you fix flats, you do not own resorts, you do not own anything. He spun around, appealing to the crowd, his eyes wide and manic. Do not listen to him, he shouted to the stunned guests, sweat already beading on his forehead. This is a trick. It is a pathetic attempt by a jealous old man to ruin my daughter's day because he could not afford a tuxedo. He is nothing. He is nobody. He is the help. Veronica was right beside him, her face a mask of ugly, twisted entitlement. She looked like a cornered cat, hissing and spitting. Arrest him! She shrieked at the security guards who were standing like statues around me. "Why are you just standing there? Arrest this man for impersonating a property owner. He is disturbing the peace. He is ruining our reputation. Do your jobs." I stood on the stage looking down at them. I did not need to shout anymore. I did not need to argue. I was the mountain and they were just the wind howling against the stone. I had dropped the bomb. Now it was time to watch the fallout. I looked toward the side entrance, the heavy double doors that led to the main lobby. They swung open with a heavy, ominous thud. Walking through them was Solomon. He looked like a shark in a $3,000 suit. He carried a briefcase that looked like it was made of dragon skin, and he walked with a slow, deliberate gait, the kind of walk that says, "I charge $1,000 an hour, and I am worth every penny." Flanking him were 4 uniformed police officers, their hands resting on their belts, their faces grim. The room went deadly silent. Even Franklin stopped screaming. He stared at the police confusion warring with fear in his eyes. Solomon walked straight to the foot of the stage. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at Brittany. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Franklin Vance with the kind of pity you save for a dog that has just run into traffic. "Mr. Vance," Solomon said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as ice, projecting clearly to the back of the room without a microphone. "I am Solomon King, Mr. Carter's personal attorney, and these officers are not here for my client." He turned slightly, gesturing to the police. "They are here for you." Franklin took a step back, bumping into the table. "Me. You are insane. You are in on it. You are another con artist. I am going to sue you both. I am going to sue you for every dime you have. I have lawyers in New York who will eat you alive." Solomon sighed, a sound of profound boredom. He placed his briefcase on the edge of the stage and clicked the latches open. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. He pulled out a stack of documents, thick and heavy, clipped together with red warning tabs. "I do not think your lawyers will be much help, Mr. Vance," Solomon said, pulling a paper from the stack. "Considering you have not paid them in 6 months, they withdrew their counsel last Tuesday." Franklin's mouth snapped shut. His eyes darted left and right, looking for an exit, looking for a way out of the trap. In fact, Solomon continued, holding the document up for the room to see. "It seems you haven't paid anyone in quite some time. This is an eviction notice, Mr. Vance. It was served this morning at the property in the Hamptons. You know the ancestral estate you told everyone here you owned, the seat of the Vance dynasty." Solomon walked over to the head table. He placed the document gently on the white tablecloth right in front of Franklin's empty plate. It turns out the real owner, a doctor, Eris from New Jersey, was quite upset to learn that his short-term rental tenants had not only overstayed their booking by 3 weeks but had also bounced the check for the extended stay. He has filed charges for theft of services. The sheriffs evicted you in absentia this morning. Your belongings, what little you actually own, are currently sitting on the curb in garbage bags. The guests gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. A murmur of Airbnb and rental and he lied rippled through the crowd like a wave. The illusion of the Vance dynasty was cracking, revealing the cheap, rotting plaster underneath. That is a lie," Veronica screamed, clutching her pearls so hard I thought the string would snap. "We are renovating. It is a misunderstanding with the bank. The wire transfer was delayed." "There is no misunderstanding, Mrs. Vance," Solomon said, turning his cold gaze to her. "Just like there is no misunderstanding about the vehicle parked in the Circle Drive. The white Rolls-Royce Phantom license plate, Vive ANCE1. Veronica went pale. Her makeup stood out like chalk on a blackboard. "What about it?" she whispered. Solomon gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the front entrance. "If you would all care to look outside." Like a flock of birds responding to a gunshot, 300 heads turned toward the windows. Outside in the circular driveway, the gray sky framed a scene of absolute humiliation. A massive tow truck had backed up to the white Rolls-Royce. A man in coveralls, real coveralls, not a costume, was hooking the heavy chains to the bumper. Police lights flashed blue and red, reflecting off the wet pavement. "That vehicle was reported stolen 3 days ago by the luxury leasing agency in Miami," Solomon explained, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Apparently using a fake identity to lease a $300,000 car and then driving it across state lines without making a single payment constitutes grand theft auto. The officers outside are simply recovering the property." Franklin Vance looked out the window. He saw his symbol of power being hoisted into the air like a dead fish. He saw the police officers talking to the valet. He saw the end of his road. He turned back to me. His face wasn't purple anymore. It was gray. It was the color of ash. The bluster was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the terrified realization of a man who had been caught naked. Moses, he whispered, his voice trembling, reaching out a hand as if I might save him. Wait, let's talk about this. We are family. We can work this out. I can explain. It was a business deal, cash flow issues, temporary. There is nothing temporary about fraud, Franklin, I said from the stage, looking down at him with zero sympathy. And we are not family. Family does not look at a man's hands and decide he is worthless. Family does not teach their daughter to treat people like garbage because they think they can get away with it. I looked at the police officers who were standing by the doors. I nodded to them. Officers, I said, these are the individuals listed in the warrant. The officers moved in. They did not run. They did not need to. They walked with the heavy, inevitable steps of the law. They approached the head table, the jingling of handcuffs the only sound in the room. Franklin Vance, Veronica Vance, the lead officer asked, pulling the metal cuffs from his belt. We have a warrant for your arrest issued by the state of Florida for wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand theft. Please place your hands behind your back. Panic, raw and animalistic, took over Veronica. She tried to bolt. She grabbed her purse and scrambled backward, knocking over her chair. No, you cannot do this. I am Veronica Vance. Do you know who I am? I have rights. We know exactly who you are, ma'am, the officer said, grabbing her arm and spinning her around efficiently. You are a fugitive. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent ballroom. It was a sharp mechanical sound that signaled the end of the party. It was the sound of reality crashing down. Franklin did not run. He just slumped. He let the officer pull his arms back. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with hate. You planned this, he hissed. You set us up. I did not set you up, Franklin, I said, my voice calm. I just turned on the lights. You were the ones dancing in the dark. As they were led away, marching past the guests they had tried so hard to impress, the room was filled with the sound of shuffling feet and whispered shock. The senators turned their backs. The business partners checked their phones, distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout. Brittany was still on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her dress. She watched her parents being dragged out in handcuffs. She watched her Rolls-Royce being towed away through the window. She watched her fake life dissolve into mist. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, vacant holes. She realized in that moment that she was alone. Her parents were gone. Her husband was broke. And her father-in-law, the man she had called filthy, was the only one left standing. I looked at her. I looked at Jamal. Solomon, I said, I think we have one more item of business to discuss. The matter of the ring. Solomon smiled. He reached into his briefcase again. Ah, yes, the diamond, the one purchased with a fraudulent loan secured against property that did not belong to the borrower. He walked toward Jamal. Jamal shrank back in his chair, looking like a child who had broken a window. The bank called Jamal, I said. They are calling the loan, immediately. Since the collateral was fraudulent, they are seizing assets. I pointed to Brittany's hand, to the rock that was sparkling on her finger, the symbol of their love, the symbol of my son's crime. They want the ring back, son, I said, and since I am the one who authorized the police to be here, I suggest you give it to them. Brittany clutched her hand to her chest. No, it is mine. He gave it to me. It is my wedding ring. It is evidence, Brittany, Solomon said coldly. Hand it over. Or do you want to join your parents in the back of a squad car for possession of stolen property? She looked at the door where her parents had vanished. She looked at the officers. With a sob that sounded like a dying animal, she ripped the ring off her finger. She threw it on the table. It spun a glittering circle of deceit before coming to a rest next to the cold, uncut wedding cake. Good, I said. Now get out. The show was over. The villains were in chains. But I still had a little bit of cleaning left to do. Brittany scrambled to her feet, her eyes darting between the empty doorway where her parents had just been dragged out in handcuffs and the diamond ring sitting on the tablecloth like a piece of cold, dead ice. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her, and like a drowning rat, she was looking for anything to climb onto. She turned to Jamal. Her face was not the face of a loving wife. It was the face of a woman realizing her meal ticket had just bounced. Do something, she shrieked. grabbing the lapels of his tuxedo and shaking him. "Do not just sit there like a coward. Your father is insane. He is ruining everything. Fix this, Jamal. Tell him to stop. Tell him to bring my parents back. Tell him to give me my ring back. You are the man, aren't you? Do something." Jamal looked at her hands clutching his jacket. Then he looked at me. He looked small. He looked like a child wearing his father's clothes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed by the sudden violent shift in the universe. The father he had treated like a servant was now the master of his fate, and he knew it. "He is not going to do anything, Brittany," I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics like a knife. "Because he cannot." I stepped off the stage. The security guards parted to let me through. I walked up to the head table, my boots heavy on the floor. I picked up the ring from the tablecloth. I held it up to the light. It was a big stone, flawless, expensive. "You like this ring, son?" I asked, looking at Jamal. "You picked a good one. 3 carats, platinum setting, $50,000. Jamal flinched at the number. Brittany let go of him and turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "Give it back," she hissed. "He bought it for me. It is mine." "He did not buy it," I said calmly. "He stole it." I reached into the pocket of my gray jumpsuit and pulled out a piece of paper. It was folded into a neat square. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately. It was the loan application, the one Solomon had shown me in the motel room, the one with the forged signature at the bottom. I smoothed it out on the table right next to the wedding cake that no one was going to eat. "Recognize this, Jamal?" I asked. Jamal looked down. He saw the paper. He saw the signature. His knees buckled and he had to grab the edge of the table to keep from falling. His face turned the color of old ash. "Dad," he whispered. I can explain. Explain what I asked, my voice hard. Explain how you walked into a lender's office and offered up my life's work as collateral for a piece of jewelry. Explain how you forged my name, the name I gave you to mortgage a garage. You never swept a business, you never built, just so you could put a rock on the finger of a woman who despises you. Brittany looked at the paper. She looked at Jamal. You mortgaged the garage," she asked, her voice low. "You told me you had the cash. You told me it was from your bonus." "He lied," I said. "Just like your parents lied. You are a match made in hell." I tapped the paper with my finger. "You thought you were clever, son," I continued. "You thought the bank would just process it. You thought I would never know until the default notice showed up in my mailbox. But you forgot one thing. You forgot who I am. You forgot that in this town, my name actually means something." I leaned in closer. Mr. Henderson at the bank called me Jamal. He called me the minute this hit his desk. He saw the signature. He knew it was fake. Jamal closed his eyes. Then why did the money go through?" he whispered. "Why did I get the cash?" "Because I let you," I said. His eyes snapped open. He looked at me with horror. "I told the bank to approve the loan," I said. But with one small adjustment. I exercised a substitution of collateral clause. I told them to remove the garage from the agreement. Jamal stared at me, trying to process the words. "Remove the garage? But then what is securing the loan?" "You are," I said. I saw the realization hit him like a physical blow. "The loan is unsecured now. Jamal," I explained, my voice devoid of pity. "And you know what happens to the interest rate on a $50,000 unsecured personal loan for a borrower with your credit history? It jumps. It skyrockets." I looked at Solomon, who was standing by the stage watching the proceedings with a grim satisfaction. "What is the current rate on that note, Solomon?" 24.9%, Solomon said clearly. "Compounded daily." I looked back at Jamal. 25%, son. And since you have no assets, since you have no house, and since I just fired you from the position you held at my subsidiary company. Oh, did you not know that was me too? You have no income. Jamal gripped the table. You fired me. I owned the logistics firm you worked for, Jamal. I set it up 5 years ago to give you a job where you could feel important without actually being able to break anything. I signed the termination paperwork this morning. Cause gross misconduct and fraud. I picked up the ring again and tossed it onto the table. It spun and rattled. So here is the math, I said. You owe $50,000. The interest is ticking as we speak. You have no job, you have no home, You have a wife who just watched her parents get arrested for being broke frauds." I paused, letting the weight of it settle on his shoulders. "With penalties and interest, by the time you find a minimum wage job, you will be paying this off for the next 15 years. Every paycheck, every dime. The bank will garnish your wages. They will take your tax refunds. They will own you." Jamal looked at the ring. He looked at Brittany. He looked at me. He sank to his knees. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was just his legs giving out under the weight of his own stupidity. He knelt on the hardwood floor of the ballroom I owned in the suit I had paid for crying over a debt he could never pay. "Dad," he sobbed. "Dad, please, I didn't mean. I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted them to respect me." "Respect?" I asked, looking down at him. "You think forgery buys respect? You think debt buys respect?" I looked at Brittany. She was backing away, looking at Jamal with pure disgust. She wasn't looking at him like a husband in crisis. She was looking at him like a bad investment. "Look at her." "Jamal," I said, pointing. "Look at your wife. Is she down there on the floor with you? Is she comforting you? Or is she calculating how fast she can get an annulment?" Jamal looked up. He reached a hand out toward Brittany. "Baby," he whispered. Brittany swatted his hand away. "Do not touch me," she hissed. "You broke loser. You lied to me. You said you had money. You said you had assets. You are nothing. You are just the son of a janitor." She spat the word janitor like it was a curse. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Wrong again, Brittany," I said. "He is the son of a multimillionaire. He just forgot that the money wasn't his." I turned back to Jamal. "You wanted to be a big man," I said. "You wanted to stand on your own. Well, stand up. The bank expects its first payment on the 1st of the month. I suggest you start looking for a job." I hear the car wash down the street is hiring. Jamal put his head in his hands and wept. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a boy who realized too late that the world does not grade on a curve. I looked at Solomon. I nodded. We were done here. I walked past my kneeling son. I walked past his horrified bride. I walked toward the exit of the ballroom. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with fear and awe. They saw the gray uniform, but they didn't see a janitor anymore. They saw power. They saw a man who could crush them with a signature. As I reached the doors, I stopped. I turned back one last time. Jamal was still on the floor. Brittany was taking the ring off the table, shoving it into her purse, probably thinking she could pawn it. She didn't realize the police would be asking for it as evidence in about 5 minutes. "Enjoy the honeymoon," I called out. Oh wait, I canceled that too. The refund went to pay the legal fees for the eviction notice on your apartment. I pushed through the doors and walked out into the lobby. The air was cooler out here, cleaner. I had destroyed my son. I knew that. I had broken him. But sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly. He had been growing crooked for years, twisted by greed and the need for validation from people who did not matter. Now he was at rock bottom. Now he had nothing. And having nothing is the only place where you can start to build something real. I walked out of the resort. I walked to my rusted truck. I climbed in and started the engine. I was going home. To my real house. To my quiet life. I was done being the help. I was done being the bank. From now on, if Jamal wanted anything from me, he was going to have to earn it. And the price of admission just went up. The silence that followed Jamal's collapse was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vacuum before the air rushes back in to cause an explosion. I stood over my son, watching him weep into his hands, a broken man in a rented suit. But while Jamal had crumbled under the weight of his own shame, Brittany had turned into something else entirely. I watched her face transform. The shock melted away, replaced by a contortion of pure, feral rage. Her eyes, which had been wide with fear moments ago, narrowed into slits. She looked at the ring on the table. She looked at her parents' empty chairs. She looked at the projection screen that still displayed the deed to my property. And then she looked at me. She did not see a father-in-law. She did not see a human being. She saw a vault that had been locked to her. She saw a lottery ticket she had thrown in the trash. And the realization broke her mind. "You fraud," she screamed. The sound tore through the ballroom, raw and ugly. She lunged at me. She moved with a speed I did not think possible in that heavy dress. She cleared the space between the head table and where I stood in 3 strides. Her hands were curled into claws, her manicured nails aiming for my face. You liar. You filthy liar. You had the money the whole time. You watched us struggle. You watched us drown. You sat there in your disgusting grease rags and laughed at us. Marcus, my head of security, stepped forward to intercept her, but I held up a hand. I did not move. I let her come. She slammed into my chest, her fists hammering against the gray polyester of my jumpsuit. She was scratching, clawing, trying to hurt me, trying to tear the truth out of me. "Give it to me," she shrieked, grabbing the lapels of my uniform and shaking me with all her strength. "It is mine. I married him. I am a Carter. That money belongs to me. You stole my life. You stole my future. You are a thief, a thief." I stood like a statue. I let her exhaust herself. I let the 300 guests watch the bride attack an old man. I let them see the greed that was pouring off her like sweat. When her strikes began to lose their power, when her screaming turned into breathless sobbing, I reached up and took her wrists. My hands, the hands she despised, were strong. I removed her grip from my uniform firmly, but without violence. I pushed her back just enough to create space between us. "I did not steal anything, Brittany," I said, my voice low and calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "I protected it. I protected my legacy from parasites. And looking at you right now, looking at the violence in your eyes because you realized you missed a payday, I know I made the right choice." She stumbled back, bracing herself against the table. Her hair was wild, her makeup smeared. She looked deranged. "You owe us," she hissed, spitting the words. "You owe us for the embarrassment. You owe us for this wedding. You have millions. Fine, then pay for this. Pay for the trauma you caused today." She swept her arm around the room, gesturing to the lavish decorations, the untouched food, the frozen waiters. "This is your fault," she said. "You ruined the wedding, so you pay for it. That is the least you can do." I looked around the room. I looked at the crystal centerpieces. I looked at the imported orchids. I looked at the champagne tower. It was a beautiful setup. It was also incredibly expensive. "Arthur," I called out without looking away from her. Arthur stepped out from the shadows near the tech booth. He was holding a leather folder. He walked onto the stage, his face impassive. "Yes, Mr. Carter. Do we have the final invoice for today's event?" I asked. "I do," Sir Arthur said. He opened the folder and pulled out a long, detailed receipt. I took it from him. I scanned the bottom line. It was a staggering number, $150,000. I looked at Brittany. She was watching me with a mixture of hatred and expectation. She thought she had me. She thought that because I was rich I would pay just to make the problem go away. She thought money was a bandage. "You are right, Brittany," I said. "This wedding is expensive. The flowers alone cost $12,000. The catering is $40,000. The venue rental, well, that is usually $50,000, but we gave you a family discount." I paused. I folded the receipt in half. "But there is a problem," I continued. "You see the contract for this event, the sponsorship agreement where the father of the groom agrees to cover all costs. It had a clause, a character clause." "Character clause," she spat. "What are you talking about?" "It states that the sponsorship is contingent upon the respectful conduct of the beneficiaries," I explained. "It is a standard clause I put in all my charity contracts. And let's be honest, Brittany, this wedding was a charity event. Jamal could not afford it. Your parents certainly could not afford it. So I was paying." I held up the receipt. "But since you decided to call the donor filthy, since you decided to make the donor sit by the trash, since you decided to physically attack the donor, I am revoking the sponsorship." I ripped the sponsorship agreement off the back of the invoice. I let the paper flutter to the floor. "That means the bill is outstanding," I said, "and the venue requires payment in full upon the conclusion or termination of the event." Brittany stared at the paper on the floor. Her eyes darted back to me. "So what?" she sneered. "Make Jamal pay it. He is your son." I shook my head. "Jamal is bankrupt, remember? The loan was called. He has no assets. He cannot sign for this." "Then who?" she screamed. "Who pays?" I walked over to the table where the original contract lay, the one she had signed months ago, the one she had signed with a flourish, thinking it was just a formality because Daddy or Moses would pick up the tab. I picked it up and pointed to the signature line. "You do," I said softly. "Me," she whispered. "You are the signatory, Brittany. Vance Global was the guarantor, but your parents just got arrested for fraud, so that entity is frozen. That leaves the secondary signatory, the bride. Brittany Vance. I walked over to her and held out the invoice. $150,000, I said. Payable immediately. We accept cashier's checks, wire transfers, or major credit cards. Although, given your family's history with credit today, I would strongly suggest cash. She looked at the invoice. She looked at the number. 150000. I do not have that kind of money, she gasped, backing away. You know I do not. Then you have a problem, I said, because this is a business, Brittany, and we do not give free rides, not to people who abuse the staff. I turned to Arthur. Arthur, what is the protocol for non-payment of services rendered? Arthur adjusted his tie. He looked at Brittany with a professional detachment that must have been terrifying. Standard protocol involves immediate liquidation of on-site assets to cover the debt, followed by legal action for the balance and potential criminal charges for theft of services if the intent to defraud can be proven. Theft of services. Brittany repeated, her voice trembling. I nodded. Like parents, like daughter, it seems to be a family tradition. She looked around the room wildly. She looked at her friends, the bridesmaids in their pastel dresses. They were all looking at their phones, avoiding eye contact. She looked at Jamal, who was still on his knees, staring at nothing. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone. Wait, she said, her hands flying to her neck. She unclasped the diamond necklace she was wearing. It was a loaner from a jeweler, but she probably hoped I didn't know that. Here, take this. It is worth $20,000. I looked at the necklace. I did not take it. Arthur, verify the provenance of that jewelry, I said. Arthur pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times. He looked up. That item is listed as property of Diamond District Rentals, sir. It was rented 3 days ago. It is due back tomorrow. I looked at Brittany. You are trying to pay me with rented jewelry, I asked. That is theft, Brittany. You are digging the hole deeper. She dropped the necklace. It clattered onto the table. She looked at her dress. It was a custom Vera Wang. My dress, she shouted. Take the dress. It cost $10,000. It is used, I said coldly. And it is stained with champagne and desperation. It has no resale value. She let out a scream that was pure frustration. What do you want from me? I have nothing. You took everything. I did not take anything, I said. I just stopped giving. There is a difference. I placed the invoice on the table in front of her. I smoothed it out. You have 24 hours to settle this account, I said. If not, my legal team will file a lien against your future earnings. They will garnish every paycheck you ever make. You will be paying for this party for the rest of your life. I leaned in close. Every time you go to work, every time you cash a check, you will remember today. You will remember the mechanic you called dirty, and you will remember that he is the one cashing your checks. Brittany collapsed. Her legs just gave out. She fell onto the chair, burying her face in her hands. She wailed. It was the sound of a child who had been told the candy store was closed forever. I looked at her one last time. I felt no pity. I felt no satisfaction. I just felt a heavy sense of completion. The surgery was done. The tumor was removed. I looked at the guests. They were silent, watching the destruction of a woman who had thought she was untouchable. Please exit the building, I announced to the room. The show is over. I turned and walked away. I walked past my son, who was still on the floor. I walked past the weeping bride. I walked past the stunned staff. I walked out the back door into the cool air of the loading dock. I walked to my truck. I had come here as a janitor. I was leaving as a free man. The invoice remained on the table, a white flag of surrender on a battlefield of gold and silk. And Brittany Vance was left to count the cost of a war she never should have started. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool evening air, leaving the wreckage of the wedding behind me. The valet stand was empty because the staff had realized there were no tips coming from this crowd. The driveway was littered with the debris of a party that had imploded, a stray flower arrangement kicked over in anger, a discarded program blowing across the asphalt. I walked toward my truck, my boots crunching on the gravel, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and lightness. I had carried the weight of my son's lies for years, and now finally I had set that burden down. But I did not get far. Before I could reach the door handle of my old Ford, I heard running footsteps behind me. They were frantic, stumbling steps, the sound of leather dress shoes slipping on pavement. Dad. Wait. Please, Dad. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a deep breath, smelling the rain that was coming in off the ocean. I adjusted the collar of my gray jumpsuit. Then slowly I turned. Jamal was running toward me. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck only to find himself on a deserted island. His bow tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck like a noose. His expensive tuxedo jacket was wrinkled and stained with sweat. Behind him, trailing like a ghost, was Brittany. She wasn't screaming anymore. She wasn't fighting. She was walking with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering, her makeup streaked down her face in black rivers. She looked at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. Jamal stopped a few feet away from me. He was panting, his chest heaving. He reached out a hand, but he didn't dare touch me. He knew better now. "Dad," he gasped, "you cannot just leave us here. You cannot do this. We have nowhere to go." I looked at him. I looked at the resort behind him, the palace I owned, the place where he had planned to be crowned king for a day. "You have feet, Jamal," I said, my voice flat. "Start walking. The main road is 2 miles that way. I am sure you can flag down a bus." "A bus?" He choked out a laugh that sounded like a sob. "Dad, be serious. We have luggage. We have nothing." "The police took the car. They took Brittany's parents. We are stranded." "That sounds like a logistical problem," I said, turning back to my truck. "And since I fired you from the logistics company this morning, it is no longer my problem to solve." He threw himself in front of me, blocking my path to the driver's side door. He fell to his knees on the asphalt, ruining the knees of his trousers. He grabbed the fabric of my jumpsuit, clutching the polyester like it was the hem of a saint's robe. "I am sorry," he wailed. "I am so sorry, Dad. I was wrong. I was stupid. I let them get in my head. I let them make me ashamed of you. But I see it now. I see who you are. You are the man. You are the boss. Please, just give us a ride. Take us home." "Home?" I asked, looking down at the top of his head. "Which home, Jamal?" "To the penthouse," he pleaded, looking up with wet, desperate eyes. "The Meridian. We can go there. We can regroup. I know the deal isn't closed, but if you own the building, if you own it, you can let us in, right? We can stay there until I get a job, until I fix this debt. Just let us into the penthouse, Dad. Please. It is empty anyway." I laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. I looked at Brittany. She had stopped shivering and was looking at me with a flicker of hope in her eyes. She thought there was still a chance. She thought the golden parachute was still deployed. "The penthouse," I repeated. "You mean Unit 4001, the crown jewel." "Yes," Jamal cried, nodding vigorously. "Yes, just give us the keys. We will be quiet. We won't ask for anything else. Just a roof over our heads." I reached into my pocket. I saw the hope flare in Jamal's eyes. He thought I was reaching for a keyring. He thought I was reaching for salvation. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and opened an email I had received 10 minutes ago from David. I turned the screen toward Jamal. "Read it," I said. He squinted at the screen. His lips moved as he read the words. "Transaction canceled. Reason: insufficient funds and fraudulent application. Buyer blacklisted. Security alert. Do not admit Jamal Carter or Brittany Vance to the premises." Locks changed. Jamal stared at the phone. He blinked, trying to make the words change. You blocked us," he whispered. "I did not just block you, son," I said, putting the phone away. "I blacklisted you. That building is for people with credit, people with honor, people who pay their bills. You are none of those things. The deal is dead. The financing you tried to fake, I sent it to the district attorney. You are not moving into the penthouse. You are lucky if you are not moving into a cell." Jamal slumped back on his heels. Okay, he stammered, panic rising in his voice. "No penthouse. Fine. We get it. We learned our lesson. Then take us to your house. The old house. The one in the district." He pointed toward the city, toward the neighborhood he had spent his entire adult life trying to escape. "We will stay in my old room," he said, his voice rushing now. "It is small, I know. It smells like oil. But we will make it work. Brittany can sleep on the twin bed. I will sleep on the floor. We will help you, Dad. I will mow the lawn. I will help you in the garage. We will be a family again. Just take us home." I looked at him. I remembered the last time he was at my house. He had stood in the doorway, refusing to come in, telling me the place smelled like poverty. He had told me to sell it. He had told me to rot in a state facility so he could use the proceeds to buy his way into society. My house, I asked. The one you called a dump. The one you said was an embarrassment. I didn't mean it, he cried. I was trying to impress them. But I love that house, Dad. I grew up there. It is my home. No, Jamal, I said, stepping over him. It was your home. Past tense. I walked to the bed of my truck. It was covered with a tarp. I pulled the bungee cords loose. Underneath, amidst the tools and the spare tires, was a black heavy-duty trash bag. It was full. It was lumpy. It looked exactly like the kind of bag you use to throw away yard waste. I grabbed the bag. It was heavy. I hauled it over the side of the truck and walked back to where Jamal was kneeling. Brittany watched me, her eyes wide with confusion. "What is that?" she whispered. I stood over my son. I held the bag out. "You want to go to my house?" I asked. "You want to sleep in your old room?" "Yes," Jamal said, reaching for me. "Yes, Dad, please." I dropped the bag. It landed at his feet with a heavy, wet thud. The plastic split slightly, revealing the contents. A sleeve of a designer shirt. A pair of expensive loafers. A silk blouse. "What is this?" Jamal asked, staring at the bag. "It is your closet," I said. He looked up at me confused. My closet." "I went to your apartment this morning, Jamal," I said, my voice cold and final. "After I left the motel. Before I came here. I have a key, remember? You gave it to me so I could water your plants while you were in the Maldives." I paused. "I did not water the plants. I packed your things." "Well, I packed what fit in this bag. The rest I left it for the landlord to deal with when he evicts you tomorrow." Jamal tore at the plastic. He pulled out a shirt. It was wrinkled. It was ruined. You went to my apartment, and then I went to my house." I continued, ignoring his question. "I called a locksmith. A good one, expensive. He changed every lock on the property. The front door, the back door, the garage, even the windows have new latches." I leaned down, getting right in his face. "My key does not work for you anymore, son. That house is a fortress. And you are on the wrong side of the wall. You told me to go to a nursing home. You told me I was a burden. Well, I solved the problem. I removed the burden from your life. You are free, Jamal. You don't have to worry about your embarrassing father anymore, because as far as you are concerned, he doesn't exist." Jamal stared at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just broke. He wasn't just homeless. He was exiled. He had been cast out of the garden he had tried to burn down. "Dad, no," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You can't. Where will we sleep? Where will we go?" I pointed to the bag. "You have clothes," I said. "You have each other. And you have the consequences of your actions. I suggest you start walking. It is going to rain soon." I turned my back on him. I walked to the driver's side door of my truck. I opened it and climbed up. The seat was worn and comfortable. It fit me. It was honest. Jamal scrambled up. He ran to the window. He banged on the glass. Dad, open the door. Do not leave us here, Dad." I started the engine. The old V8 roared to life, drowning out his pleas. I put the truck in gear. I did not look at him. I did not look at Brittany, who was standing on the curb staring at the trash bag full of her ruined clothes, looking like she had just woken up in hell. I released the parking brake. I eased the truck forward. Jamal ran alongside for a few steps, his hand on the door handle, begging, crying, promising things he could never deliver. But I accelerated. I watched him fall behind in the side mirror. He stopped running. He stood there in the middle of the service road, a tiny figure in a tuxedo shrinking into the distance. He fell to his knees again, right next to the trash bag. I turned the corner and he was gone. I drove toward the exit gate. The same guard was there. He saw me coming. He ran out of the booth and opened the gate wide, saluting me as I passed. "Have a good evening, Mr. Carter," he shouted. I nodded to him. I drove out onto the main road. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was beautiful. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded loan application with the forged signature. I rolled down the window. The wind rushed in cool and clean. I held the paper out the window. I let go. I watched it flutter away in the rearview mirror, dancing in the wind before landing in the ditch. I was done. I was going home. And for the first time in a long time, the air in my house was going to be clean. I watched the collapse of the Vance dynasty through the rearview mirror of my truck, But the details, the gritty, satisfying mechanics of their destruction were relayed to me in real time by Solomon and Arthur. It was not enough to simply light the fuse. I needed to know exactly how the building burned down. As I idled at the end of the long driveway waiting for a break in the traffic, I saw the flashing lights intensify near the main entrance. The police officers I had summoned did not waste time. Franklin and Veronica Vance, the self-proclaimed royalty of the Hamptons, were not escorted to a limousine. They were marched out in steel bracelets. Franklin was shouting his face a mottled map of rage and terror, screaming about jurisdiction and knowing the governor. He did not seem to realize that the governor does not typically intervene in federal wire fraud cases involving stolen identities and laundered money. Solomon told me later that when the officers ran Franklin's ID, the system lit up like a Christmas tree. There were warrants from Florida, New York, and Nevada. It turned out that the Vance fortune was built entirely on a Ponzi scheme of maxed-out credit cards opened in the names of deceased relatives. Veronica wasn't just a spender, she was the architect. She had been forging signatures on loan documents for a decade. As they were shoved into the back of separate squad cars, Veronica lost one of her shoes. It was a fake Louboutin. The red sole was peeling off, revealing the cheap plastic heel underneath. It lay there on the asphalt, a perfect symbol of their entire existence. Inside the resort, the scene was even uglier. Arthur, my general manager, followed my instructions to the letter. He did not let Brittany leave. He did not let her retreat to a hotel room to cry. He cornered her in the lobby, surrounded by the remnants of her wedding party who were too embarrassed to make eye contact. Brittany was hysterical. She was screaming that she was a victim, that her father would pay, that her husband would fix it. But Arthur, standing tall in his suit, simply presented her with the reality of her situation. The invoice for $150,000 was due. Immediate payment required. She tried to run. She actually tried to hike up her $10,000 dress and sprint for the door, but my security team blocked her path. They did not touch her. They just stood there, immovable objects against her unstoppable entitlement. "You cannot keep me here," she shrieked. "This is kidnapping. It is detention for theft of services," Arthur corrected her calmly. "You signed a contract, Mrs. Carter. You consumed the food, you drank the wine, you utilized the venue, and now the bill must be paid. If you walk out that door without settling this account, the police officers outside who are currently processing your parents will be more than happy to add you to their booking sheet." Brittany looked out the window. She saw her mother weeping in the back of a police cruiser. The fight drained out of her. She realized she was trapped. "I do not have the money," she sobbed, collapsing onto a velvet bench. "I have nothing." "Then we will have to liquidate assets," Arthur said. He pointed to the ring. "The 3-carat diamond that Jamal had stolen my future to buy." Brittany clutched her hand to her chest, trying to hide it. "That is mine," she cried. "It is proceeds of a fraudulent loan," Arthur said. "But right now it is the only currency you have. Give it to me. We will appraise it at current market scrap value and deduct it from your bill." She struggled. She screamed. But in the end, the threat of jail was stronger than her vanity. She slid the ring off her finger. Arthur took it. He handed it to his assistant, who ran it to the on-site jeweler we kept for the gift shop. $25,000, Arthur announced a few minutes later. "That covers the flowers and the appetizers. You still owe $125,000. Brittany looked at her dress. It was the only thing of value she had left. "The dress," Arthur said. "No," she whispered. "You cannot be serious. I am naked underneath." "We have a robe from the spa you can borrow," Arthur said without blinking. "But the dress stays. It is a Vera Wang custom. We can auction it to recover some of the catering costs." And so in the middle of the lobby of the resort she had tried to rule, Brittany Vance was forced to go behind a privacy screen set up by the concierge. She stripped off the symbol of her vanity. She handed over the silk and the lace. She emerged wrapped in a white terry cloth bathrobe, shivering, humiliated, and stripped bare. But even with the ring and the dress, the math did not work. She was still short. She signed a promissory note for the balance, a legal shackle that would follow her for decades. She walked out of that resort with no husband, no parents, no ring, and a debt that would garnish her wages until she was gray. While Brittany was being dismantled in the lobby, Jamal was facing his own execution on the curb. He was still kneeling where I had left him, staring at the trash bag full of his clothes. He was holding his phone, trying to call friends, trying to call anyone who could save him. But no one was answering. The guests had seen the show. They knew Jamal Carter was toxic. They knew he was broke. Then his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was not a text from a friend. It was an official correspondence from his employer, except it wasn't just any employer. Jamal worked as a vice president of sales for a logistics firm called Apex Distribution. He had gotten the job 5 years ago. He thought he was headhunted because of his brilliance. He thought he was a rising star. He never knew that Apex Distribution was a subsidiary of Carter Holdings. He never knew that I had created the position specifically for him, paying his salary out of my own pocket through a shell company so he could feel like a big man without actually having the responsibility that could sink the business. I had protected him from his own incompetence for half a decade. But forgery is a line you do not cross. I had dictated the termination letter myself before I left the garage that morning. David had timed the delivery perfectly. Jamal opened the email. I can imagine the glow of the screen illuminating his tear-streaked face. Notice of immediate termination, the subject line read. Jamal clicked it. His hands must have been shaking. Dear Mr. Carter, effective immediately, your employment with Apex Distribution is terminated for cause. An internal audit has revealed gross misconduct, specifically the use of fraudulent financial documents to secure personal loans, which is a direct violation of the company's Code of Ethics and Moral Turpitude Clause. Furthermore, as the company has been made aware of pending criminal investigations regarding identity theft and forgery against the company's primary shareholder, we are legally obligated to sever all ties. Your company credit card has been deactivated. Your company car has been reported as retrieved. Your access to the building has been revoked. Security will box up your personal effects and leave them at the front desk. Do not attempt to enter the premises. Regards, Human Resources. Jamal stared at the phone. He read the line again. The company's primary shareholder. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He looked up at the resort. He looked at the gate where I had just driven away. You, he whispered to the empty air. It was you the whole time. He realized then that every paycheck he had ever cashed, every bonus he had ever bragged about, every promotion he thought he had earned, it all came from me. I had built the stage he danced on. And I had just turned off the lights. He had no job. He had a $50,000 debt that was accruing interest at 25%. He had an eviction notice on his apartment. He had a wife who was currently signing away her financial future in the lobby. He was not just unemployed, he was unemployable. Who would hire a man who forged his own father's signature? Who would trust a man who tried to mortgage a business he didn't own? Jamal stood up. His legs were shaky. He looked at the trash bag. He looked at the darkening sky. He grabbed the plastic bag and hoisted it over his shoulder. It was heavy. It was awkward. He started walking. Not toward the resort, not toward the city. He just walked. He walked down the long, lonely road leading away from paradise. A man in a ruined tuxedo carrying a bag of trash walking into a future that was dark, cold, and entirely of his own making. I watched him disappear around the bend in the rearview mirror before I finally pulled out onto the highway. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel sorrow. I felt the satisfaction of a mechanic who has finally stripped down a faulty engine. The parts were scattered. The rust was exposed. Now we would see if he had what it took to rebuild himself. But he would have to do it without my tools. I turned on the radio. Some blues song was playing. It sounded right. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel of my old Ford. The Vances were in jail. Brittany was in debt. Jamal was on the street. The balance sheet was finally corrected. And for the first time in years, the ledger of my life was in the black. I drove toward the city, leaving the wreckage in the dust. I had a business to run. And tomorrow I was going to hire a new vice president of sales. Someone who knew the value of hard work. Someone who didn't mind getting their hands dirty. 30 days had passed since the wedding that never happened. 30 days since the house of cards collapsed and the dust settled over the ruins of the Vance dynasty. The city had moved on as cities always do, churning forward with new scandals and new gossip. But inside the walls of Carter Classics, time moved at the speed I chose. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sunlight slanted through the high windows of the garage, turning the dust motes into floating gold. I was alone in the main bay. The staff had gone home for the day, leaving me with the silence and the smell of carnauba wax and high-octane fuel. I was sitting on a rolling stool next to my pride and joy, a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, raven black, 7 liters of pure American muscle. It was a car that commanded respect just by sitting still. I held a microfiber cloth in my hand, moving it in slow, concentric circles over the fender. I was not just cleaning the car, I was meditating. For 50 years, this motion had been my prayer. Polish on, polish off. Fix what is broken. Make the dull things shine. It was honest work. It was the only work that had never lied to me. The large bay door was open, framing a rectangle of the concrete lot outside. The heat of the day was fading, leaving behind a warm breeze that ruffled the calendars on the wall. I was at peace. My accounts were secure, my name was cleared, the parasites were gone. Then a shadow fell across the fender. It was long and thin, stretching out across the polished concrete floor until it touched the toe of my boot. I did not look up immediately. I finished the circle I was rubbing. I folded the cloth. I placed it on the tray next to the polish. Only then did I lift my eyes. Standing in the opening of the bay door was a figure that looked like a bad memory. He was wearing jeans that were stained and torn at the knees. His shirt, once a designer polo, was gray with grime and hung loosely on a frame that had lost 20 pounds in a month. His hair was unkempt, his face covered in a patchy, neglected beard. He held a cardboard sign in one hand, but he dropped it when he saw me. It was Jamal, my son, the vice president, the man who was supposed to live in a penthouse. He stood there swaying slightly as if the wind might blow him over. He looked at the Mustang, he looked at the clean, organized shop, and then he looked at me. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red, the eyes of a man who hasn't slept in a bed for a long time. He took a step forward, but he stopped when he hit the line where the sunlight met the shadow of the garage. He knew he didn't belong in the shade. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was dry, cracking like dead leaves. I did not answer. I picked up a bottle of tire shine and a fresh sponge. I moved to the front wheel. I sprayed the rubber. I began to wipe. "Dad, it is me," he said, his voice trembling. I know you said to stay away. I know I am exiled, but I have nowhere else to go." I kept wiping the tire. The black rubber gleamed wet and perfect. "Brittany left me, Dad." He continued the words, tumbling out in a rush of misery. "She left me the day after the wedding. She went back to some ex-boyfriend in Jersey who has a boat. She took the last of the cash I had in my wallet. She left me at the bus station. I moved to the next tire. I sprayed. I wiped. I did not look at him. I have been sleeping in a shelter on 4th Street, he said, tears beginning to track through the dirt on his face. But they kicked me out this morning because I lost my shoes. Someone stole them while I was asleep. I walked here in these." He pointed to his feet. He was wearing a pair of cheap plastic flip-flops that were 2 sizes too small. "I am hungry, Dad," he whispered. "I haven't eaten since yesterday. I am not asking for money. I swear, I am not asking for a loan. I know I lost that right." He took a step into the garage. He looked around at the buckets, the hoses, the sponges. "I just want a job," he pleaded. "I will wash the cars. I will sweep the floor. I will clean the toilets. I do not care. You were right. I should have learned the trade. I should have learned the value of work. I will be the janitor, Dad. I will be the help. Just, please, give me something to eat. Let me work for it." I stopped wiping the tire. I set the sponge down. I stood up. My knees popped a sound that echoed in the quiet space. I grabbed a rag and wiped my hands. My hands were clean. There was no grease under my nails today. I turned and faced him. He flinched as if he expected me to hit him. "You want a job?" I asked. My voice was low, rolling through the garage like the idle of a powerful engine. "Yes," he sobbed, nodding frantically. "Yes, please. Anything. I will do anything." "You want to wash my cars?" I asked. "You want to touch this Mustang?" "Yes, Dad. I will make it shine. I promise." I walked toward him. He smelled of sweat and desperation and the street. It was a smell I recognized. It was the smell of rock bottom. But unlike the smell of honest labor, this scent carried the stench of moral decay. I stopped 3 feet away from him. I looked him up and down. I looked at the hands that had forged my signature. I looked at the eyes that had looked away while his wife humiliated me. "You say you want to be the janitor," I said. "You say you want to clean. But you do not understand what cleaning means, Jamal." I can learn," he stammered. "Cleaning isn't just about removing dirt," I said. "It is about respect. It is about caring for something enough to maintain it. When I sweep a floor, I do it with pride because I own the floor. When I fix an engine, I do it with honor because my name is on the work." I pointed to the Mustang. "That car is worth $300,000, I said. "It is a masterpiece. It requires a delicate touch. It requires integrity." I looked back at him. "And you, son, you have no integrity. You sold my name for a ring. You sold your father for a seat at a table with thieves. You forged a document that could have cost me this entire building. But I am sorry, he wailed, falling to his knees on the concrete. I am sorry, I am starving, Dad. Doesn't that count for anything? I am your flesh and blood. Flesh and blood is biology, I said coldly. Family is loyalty, and you broke that contract. I walked past him to the wall where the control panel for the bay door was mounted. I placed my hand on the button. You called me filthy Jamal, I said, looking at him over my shoulder. You told me I smelled like oil. You told me to use the service entrance because I wasn't clean enough for your world. I pressed the button. The motor overhead hummed to life. The heavy steel chain began to rattle. The large metal door began to descend, a slow, unstoppable curtain falling between us. Well, now the tables have turned, I said, my voice rising over the sound of the motor. This garage is a sanctuary. It is a place for honest men and honest machines. It is a place where we fix things. But some things, Jamal, are too broken to be fixed. The door was halfway down now, casting a shadow over his kneeling form. This place requires clean hands, son, I said, delivering the final verdict. And your soul is too dirty to touch my cars. Dad. No, he screamed, scrambling forward, trying to crawl under the closing door. Dad, please, I am hungry. I am your son. I did not stop the door. I did not look back. Go to the shelter, Jamal, I said. Stand in line. Learn what it means to start from zero. Maybe in 10 years, if you build yourself back up, if you scrub that stain off your soul, you can knock on my front door. But not today. Today the shop is closed. The door hit the concrete with a final resounding clang. The sunlight was cut off. The scream was cut off. I was alone in the dim light of the garage. Silence returned heavy and absolute. I stood there for a moment listening. I could hear muffled sobbing from the other side of the metal. I could hear the sound of fists weakly pounding against the steel. And then I heard the sound of footsteps dragging away across the gravel, slow and defeated. I walked back to the Mustang. I picked up the microfiber cloth. I found a spot I had missed on the hood. I began to rub. Circular motions. Wax on, wax off. My heart hurt. Of course it hurt. No father wants to hear his child beg for food. But I knew that if I opened that door, if I gave him $1, if I gave him a mop, I would be enabling the sickness that had almost destroyed us both. He needed the fire. He needed the hunger. It was the only teacher he had left. I polished the car until I could see my face in the black paint. I looked old. I looked tired. But I looked clean. I was Moses Carter. I was a mechanic. And I had just fixed the hardest problem of my life.